Welcome to Leaf Love, where Naruto stories meet love and destiny. Today's fanfic is, What If Naruto Fell in Love with Haku and Awakened a Forbidden Power? Part 1. If you love emotional fanfictions, and powerful what-if stories, you are in the right place. So please, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Leaf Love for more emotional Naruto stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. And now let's begin. A young woman knelt next to an unconscious boy tending to his injuries while he recovered from the battle that raged 2 days prior. With utmost care she took the small towel from his head, and re-wet it before wringing the excess water out, and placing it on his forehead. Gently she ran her fingers over his whisker-like scars on his cheeks as she remembered how she had met the boy, as well as how she had found herself falling for him. His smile is like a ray of sunshine. It brings such a feeling of warmth that I can't help but feel safe with him. She smiled softly, remembering how her heart jumped when he smiled at her that day in the woods. The smile faded though as she remembered the battle on the bridge, and the look in his eyes when he thought she had killed his teammate. Tears filled her eyes as the image of his eyes filled with such pain and sorrow filled her vision, and she vowed to herself to never allow him to feel that way again, even if it cost her life. So caught up in her thoughts about the boy that she was growing to love more each day, she failed to notice her father figure standing in the doorway behind her. "Haku, you need to get some rest yourself. Come downstairs to eat," he said gruffly, even though worry could be seen in his eyes. Startled by the sound of his voice, she quickly wiped her face before responding without moving from her spot next to the boy. "I can't leave Naruto-kun. He needs me to take care of him, Zabuza-sama." Using actions to illustrate her point, she took the towel from Naruto's head to re-wet it, and wring it out before placing it gently back on his forehead. Zabuza sighed, not wanting to deal with the emotional fluff. "Haku, are you disobeying me?" he said in a cold voice normally reserved for people that were about to die. The girl flinched upon hearing this, and balled her hands on her legs, causing the fabric of the kimono to bunch up. With her eyes locked on the sleeping face before her, she spoke in a quiet but firm voice. "If I must, Zabuza-sama. Naruto-kun not only saved your life and mine, he spared me when he was well within his right to kill me." Her voice grew softer as she continued to speak, even as it was filled with growing determination. "He is a great man that should be cared for, and even revered, if for no other reason than the size of his heart. He has overcome hardships even greater than my own, and has not only survived, but has stayed true to himself where almost anyone else would have been lost." A smile graced her soft lips as she gently placed her hand on his face. "I can never repay him for what he has done for us, Otu-san." The large man rubbed his forehead, knowing she wouldn't leave his side willingly. Deciding to make this easy on himself, he walked over and started to drag Haku out of the room by the back of her kimono. "This is for your own good, Haku. He'll be fine for a while without you. After all, there are 4 other ninja in this house." Haku struggled to no avail in Zabuza's grip, and let out a yell as even holding onto the doorframe was futile. "Otou-san." Unbeknownst to them, the racket they made had helped the unconscious boy awaken. Slowly, over several minutes, Naruto became aware of his surroundings as if he was floating to the surface of a lake. It was about 10 minutes after Haku's shout that his eyes finally opened. Squinting from the light coming through the window, he groaned from the headache he had, and slowly sat up. After a few more moments he regained his equilibrium, and got dressed. It was a slow process since his body still ached, and his headache stayed steady except for occasional spikes whenever he looked at something too bright for his eyes to handle. With one hand on his head, he slowly headed downstairs, following the sounds of daily life. Reaching the dining room, he didn't even notice who was there, and pulled out a chair at the table before gingerly lowers his body down. Finally noticing some small conversation going on around him, he looked up to see who was speaking, having not noticed this earlier due to having his head feel like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. As his vision focused, he saw a very attractive, finely boned girl slightly older than himself smiling as she talked to a one-armed man that looked like he escaped from a psych ward through a minefield. As realization dawned on his still foggy brain as to who he was sitting with, his jaw dropped and he stumbled back, tripping over the chair and falling onto his back. As the impact with the floor seemingly settled his surprise, he slowly stood back up, holding his head. What the hell is going on? I would think I was still asleep if my head didn't hurt so much. Naruto-kun, are you alright? You should know better than to do things like that since you haven't fully recovered yet. The girl said as she helped him back to the chair. As Naruto tried to settle his head, the pale beauty went into the kitchen to get the teen some food, as she had heard of his inhuman appetite from his teammates. Coming out of his stupor as he placed a plate in front of him, he eyed the bandaged one-armed man before looking back at her. Haku-chan, what is going on? The last thing I remember, Kakashi-sensei and Zabuza were going at it, and you had turned Sasuke-tem into a porcupine. Looking down and blushing slightly as she recalled the memories from the battle that had taken place the night before last. Looking up at Naruto, she met his sapphire blue slit eyes, causing her blush to deepen. She glanced at the man who had been her father figure for the last several years, ashamed at herself for the part she had played in the battle. Seeing the look his adopted daughter gave him, he sighed and pushed away his meal with his one remaining arm. I will tell him, Haku. Go ahead and finish your lunch. I'm sure Tsunami could use your help when you are through. Zabuza turned to regard the boy that had started to eat the food Haku had placed before him. Silently he studied the young man that had not only saved his and Haku's life, but had brought them closer as well. Taking note of his daughter's glances at Naruto, he was unsure of himself on this issue despite being infamous for slaughtering his entire graduating class and master of the silent kill technique. This of course irritated him no end and showed itself in the increasingly hard drumming of his fingers on the table. Focusing on Naruto as Haku left to find Tsunami, Zabuza saw the boy wearily watching him. Since you clearly remember events up until you started fighting Haku, I will start from there. The large man absently rubbed the shoulder of his missing arm as he recalled the battle, and what the others have told him. When you saw Sasuke put into a near-death state by Haku, you, apparently thinking he was dead, went into an enraged state and charged Haku. Not wanting to fight you, she threw a bunch of senbon at you, trying to incapacitate you the same way she did with your teammate. Somehow her aim was off and you got hit in the eyes. Haku was giving you first aid when the mist started to clear enough for you guys to see Kakashi has me pinned with his dog summons, and about to use some lightning technique to finish me off. Looking out the window, Haku and Tsunami could be seen hanging laundry as they talked. Shaking his head to clear the thoughts of his tool-turned-daughter, he looked back to a seemingly confused Naruto poking himself in the eye. When Haku saw this, she rushed over, taking the blow herself to save me. Before Kakashi landed the hit though, you appeared, knocking Haku aside and deflecting the strike. You saved my daughter's life as well as my own, but it cost me my left arm. Zabuza pointed to his heavily bandaged left side, smirking at the pale look Naruto gave him, able to tell how stupid and suicidal what he had done was. Taking great satisfaction in making this genin sweat, he raised his killer intent at Naruto, fully enjoying the distress he showed. Seeing Haku look worriedly back to the house, he chuckled and lowered his ki back down before continuing the story. It was at this point that we heard clapping coming from the end of the bridge. It turned out to be that ugly little shit Gato with 100 or so of his cronies. He gave some long-winded speech about how he never intended to pay us because he was going to have us killed. He went on to say how it would be cheaper to have his goons kill all of us now that we were all injured and tired from fighting each other, and as a reward his gang could raise the village. He also offered a bonus to whoever captured Haku, so she could be turned into his private bedroom slave. Kakashi and I called a truce so we could deal with Gato and his goons together. Before we could engage them, a crossbow bolt landed between us, drawing everyone's attention. Turns out the little brat had rallied the villagers after you saved him and Tsunami from those two sorry excuses for swordsmen, and had brought them to the bridge in time to help fight Gato. Zabuza turned to the door as Tsunami and Haku walked back inside with empty clothes baskets. Haku glancing between her father and Naruto to reassure herself that Zabuza hadn't maimed the boy, and smiled seeing Naruto trying to process what he had been told. Scratching his head, Naruto looked at Zabuza. What about Sakura and Sasuke? You said he was put into a near-death state like you were after our first fight. Does that mean Sakura and him are okay? They are doing better than you are, Naruto-kun. Sasuke-san was fully recovered yesterday. He and Sakura-san are with Kakashi-san helping at the bridge. The village has been celebrating every day since Gato was killed, and everyone that is able is helping to finish the bridge. Kakashi-san told us to make sure you rested, and ate as much as you wanted if you woke up while they were gone. Would you like more to eat, Naruto-kun? That would be great. I'm starving. Just how long was I out for, by the way? I know it was at least a day since Sasuke recovered yesterday, and from what my stomach is telling me it has been way too long since my last meal. Naruto chuckled sheepishly as his stomach growled loudly, reinforcing what he had just said. Giggling softly, Haku moved into the kitchen to get more food with Tsunami's help. Naruto watched the two women cooking, unable to hear what they were discussing, still trying to wrap his head around what was going on. Not truly surprised at Zabuza and Haku seemingly changing sides in the middle of a battle, as this was far from unheard of in the world of shinobi. He was grinning in his goofy way, glad that his team was alright after such a rough event, especially since in retrospect they should have returned to the village for backup. Suddenly feeling a wave of ki, he turned to see Zabuza glaring at him. Haku is the daughter I never had, boy. Be very careful you don't do anything that would cause me to do something unpleasant to you. Zabuza stated as he sharpened his ki on Naruto, causing him to visibly sweat. Suddenly several ice Senbon embedded themselves into the table, breaking the tension. Zabuza-sama, there is no need to treat Naruto-kun like that. He still hasn't fully recovered from the battle. Haku stated, frowning at him as her and Tsunami placed several plates on the table. Seeing as she was irked at her father about his treatment of Naruto, it was no surprise she was protective of him, or that she embedded a Senbon in Zabuza's arm when he reached for one of the plates. This food is for Naruto-kun. Haku stated firmly, holding more Senbon at the ready. You have already recovered from the battle, and are capable of getting your own food, or at the very least asking. Naruto-kun is too strong, kind, caring, nice, loyal, and cute to be treating the way you have been, Oto-san. Not realizing every word she had said, she was caught completely off guard as she heard Tsunami speak. So you think Naruto-san is cute? Tsunami's smile grew as Haku looked rapidly at everyone there with a growing look of embarrassment. It's not really surprising considering how hard he fought, and saved your life. It must have been like a white knight rescuing a damsel in distress. Haku's embarrassment grew with every word until she saw Naruto scratching the back of his head, and spoke with a fox-like grin, "Hey. I'm cute." Those words were the last straw for her as she started backing to the door. I'll go inform Kakashi-san that you are awake. With that said, she quickly ran out the door, forgetting to even put her shoes on. With Kakashi, the elite Jonin appeared to be doing nothing more than reading a small orange book, but if anyone had been paying close enough attention they would have noticed that he had not turned a page in over an hour. Though no one could tell, he was truly worried about one of his students. It was the second day after the Battle of the Bridge, and Naruto had yet to wake up. This worried the man known as Kakashi, the copy ninja, greatly, especially since he was one of the few that knew Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox Biju, known throughout the elemental nations as the Kyuubi no Yoko. Being honest with himself, he was terrified when he felt the demonic aura coming from Naruto as he tapped into the Kyuubi's chakra. He was definitely not looking forward to telling the Hokage about what had happened when they returned to Konoha. Looking at his other students with his one uncovered eye, he wondered what was going through their minds after the last week. Sasuke had been silent, but that was nothing out of the ordinary. Sakura had been frowning a lot, and looking worried ever since the battle. He had explained to them about Zabuza and Haku no longer being a threat since Gato was dead, but that had only lessened the pink-haired girl's worry by a small margin. It had been difficult to get them to help on the bridge until he had explained that helping to build the bridge was a form of training. It worked rather well since Kakashi needed the time to figure out what he was going to do when he gave the mission debriefing to the Hokage, and the so-called training kept Sakura and Sasuke occupied at the same time. Despite all the time he had been thinking about the situation, he was no closer to being able to put the whole series of events into a positive light than when he first started. So deep in thought was he that he did not notice a pale young woman body flicker to his position on the bridge until she addressed him. Kakashi-san, Naruto-kun is awake, and eating. It appears he doesn't remember anything after I incapacitated Sasuke, so Zabuza-sama filled him in. He didn't tell him everything just as you requested. Thank you, Haku. Would you mind taking over guard duty while I take Sasuke and Sakura back to the house? Not at all, Kakashi-san. With Gato gone there shouldn't be any issues. Kakashi put his book away and headed over to where Sasuke and Sakura were to tell them Naruto was awake. Sasuke's reaction was to grunt and dust himself off. Sakura on the other hand sighed in relief and grinned, eager to see how her other teammate was doing. A short time later, Zabuza was sitting outside watching the waves as he relaxed more than he had in a very long time, contemplating the recent changes to his life, and where things would go from here. As a missing nin, his survivability had drastically declined with the loss of his left arm. Combine that with his realization of just how precious Haku was to him, he was more than reluctant to return to the life he had lived for the last 10 years. No longer seeing Haku as nothing more than a useful tool, he wanted to make sure she was safe, and didn't have to run from Hunter Nin only to end up dead or worse. He knew of Konoha by its reputation, and the shinobi he had met from there only reinforced his opinion of it. As his thoughts focused more on Haku, he knew it would break his heart to cause Haku more pain than he already has, especially after what she had experienced during the bloodline purges in Kiri. These thoughts only made him realize he had already reached a decision when he heard Team 7 returning. Calm down, Sakura. Haku said he was fine, so stop worrying. If he needs more medical treatment, the Hokage will make sure he gets it when we return. More than likely he will have all of us go to the hospital for examinations. Kakashi-sensei is right. You know how fast he heals. I'm surprised he wasn't up yesterday giving us all headaches with his antics. So enjoy the peace and quiet while you can, Sakura. Seeing Zabuza leaning against the house, Kakashi sent the kids inside to talk with Naruto before heading over to speak with the man. I assume you have come to a decision, Zabuza. Yes, Kakashi, I have. I still have my doubts about it, but all things considered it is probably for the best. We will go with you to Konoha, but I won't spill the beans on any sensitive info about Kiri. I may be a missing nin, but I know doing that would only cause more problems for me and Haku. I wouldn't expect you to, Zabuza. Of course there will be a probationary period if the Hokage does allow you to stay in Konoha, and you will be watched by Anbu during that time. Yeah, whatever. Zabuza said as he waved his remaining hand as if to brush the subject away. You know that kid is a piece of work. He may act like a buffoon, but he has a good head on his shoulders as well as a big heart. He has a lot of potential to go far if he doesn't get killed like a lot in our line of work do. Sighing as how Zabuza was right, and that people in his own village wanted Naruto dead because of what was sealed within him. I agree, and it's a sad thing so many in Konoha don't like him. Mostly because of all the pranks he pulls, but it's just a cry for attention since he grew up an orphan. Really, no wonder Haku connected with him so well. They had similar childhoods. It makes me more supportive of their friendship since it seems highly unlikely he will cause her harm. That is something you won't have to worry about. Naruto is severely loyal to his friends, and will not hesitate to jump to their defense. I am confident he will help her integrate into the village sooner, and help her make friends her own age. You have to keep in mind though that he is known as Konoha's most surprising ninja. Hey, after all he caught 2 Jonin-level ninja off guard enough to turn the tide of battle more than once. Replying with a chuckle, Zabuza smiled as he spoke. Who would have ever thought that a mere genin barely out of the academy would surprise a Jonin, let alone do anything to change a Jonin-level fight? Judging by what I've seen of him fight, I certainly wouldn't want to fight him once he gets Jonin. The boy will grow up to be a monster on the battlefield. Tell me about it. When he graduated the academy, I gave the team a test to see if they would stay genin or go back to the academy. During the test, Naruto actually did so well he made me have to put away the book I was using as a handicap, and even think about revealing my Sharingan. Quote. Raising a non-existent eyebrow, Zabuza showed his surprise. That is no simple feat. For a genin to make some with a 35 million Ryo bounty on his head bring out the big guns is no laughing matter. Hey, I'm just glad the other jonin didn't see that. They never would have let me live it down. They were surprised as it was when the meeting was had to notify the Hokage about who passed, since I have never passed a genin team before. Hearing people talking in the distance, the two high-level shinobi turned to see who was approaching. The bridge builder Tazuna could be seen talking with Haku as they casually walked toward the house. Glancing at each other for a moment in silent communication, Zabuza nodded before heading into the house. Pushing himself away from the house, Kakashi walked over towards the old man and the girl. It looks like everything went well. Were there any problems we should know about? Tazuna laughed before answering. The only problem was getting everyone to stop bombarding this girl with questions, and do the work they were supposed to be doing. If things keep going at the rate they have been, I'd say the bridge will done in a few days. That is good to hear, Kakashi said before turning to Haku. Why don't you head inside? Tsunami should have dinner ready soon. You might also want to see how Naruto is doing. Sakura has a habit of trying to cause him brain damage. Thank you, Kakashi-san. I'm sure Tsunami-san could use some help with having to make cook for so many people. The young Kunoichi said as she hurried into the house. Slipping his hands into his pockets, Tazuna chuckled slightly. She will make a great wife someday. Kind, caring, good around the house. The only downside is Zabuza. He's not a bad guy once you get to know him, but Kami forbid any of her future suitors piss him off. Remembering some of the looks Haku had given Naruto as well, Kakashi's sweat dropped as he could easily see Zabuza chasing Naruto around town trying to dismember him with his sword. You're right. I hope whoever catches her eye is smart enough to realize it. Night found Naruto laying on the roof staring at the moon in thought. As the day went on, he noticed something odd happening to his eyes. His sight grew clear and sharper. His range of vision also increased. After hearing what happened during the last fight, he thought it had something to do with how his eyes were healing after they got injured. He knew by all rights he should be blind from the damage Haku did with her Senbon. He was glad that was not the case, but it still worried him with how they were healing. Lost in his thoughts, he never noticed his eyes slowly closing as sleep overwhelmed him. Opening his eyes, he found himself in what appeared to be a cavernous room with a cage on one end that stretched the entire width and height of the room. There was ankle-deep water covering the floor, and by the looks of the wall he was in a large sewer. Turning toward the cage, he heard a roaring of wind coming from within. Slowly walking forward, he heard movement from inside the cage, soon to be revealed as a red nine-tailed fox towering several hundred feet above him. The fox stared at the boy, who was too stunned to be afraid. So you finally show up, Kit. I knew it would only be a matter of time since you tapped into my chakra. The monstrous demon fox chuckled in a way that sent shivers down Naruto's spine. Grinning, Kyuubi lowered down until his eyes were only a good 30 feet from the floor. I imagine you have questions about your eyes. You have me to thank for that. With your eyes damaged, I decided to improve them as I focused on healing you. A blind container would be insulting to me after all. The strongest of the Biju chuckled in an alarmingly demonic fashion before continuing. Your eyes have turned out even more powerful than I had planned. Unfortunately, I sneezed during the process, so even I am unsure of the extent they have been altered. Naruto stood still, terrified of the creature before him, having heard stories about how the Kyuubi no Yoko would have left Konoha a smoldering ruin if it wasn't for the fourth defeating it. As a curious expression crossed his face, Naruto's fear strangely decreased to an almost negligible amount. Where are we? You healed me. Hell, why would a demon like you be healing me in the first place? He suddenly held his hands on his head as if the thoughts were giving him a severe headache. Gah, what the hell is going on? One of Haku's Senbon must have gone into my brain or something. There is no way this can be real. Oh no, Kit, this is all quite real. Take a seat. This may take a while since you apparently know nothing of what has happened. While I was attacking your village, something I didn't want to do at first, the shinobi there tried to fight me off to no avail. Many fell before me until Minato Namikaze showed up. When I saw him I could not help but laugh as he appeared to be offering me his own newborn baby boy as a sacrifice. Oh, how wrong I was. I will not bore you with the details since you obviously won't understand them. When I neared him he caught me off guard by using the Shinigami to seal me within the infant. So here we are chatting in the depths of your mindscape. Although the greatest of the Biju chuckled at the completion of his statement, his tails could be seen moving in displeasure. The only upside to the current situation was that the boy was in such a state of confused denial it was almost comical. Suddenly the fur on the terror of the elemental nations bristled as he saw something behind the boy. Watching carefully he saw a pair of eyes float through the air towards the boy. The eyes stopped just above and behind the boy, looking at Kyuubi, assessing him in a way that even made his skin crawl. So this is the origin of my being here. It is very interesting and yet abominably disappointing that I am part of such a pathetic creature. Naruto turned quickly, stumbling back in surprise as he stared in shock at the eyes that just spoke. Wah, how, when? The boy clutched his chest, trying to get his heart to calm down as he shook his head in denial to the events transpiring before him. I must have eaten some bad fish or something. This has got to be a nightmare. First the Kyuubi claims to be in my head and now a pair of floating eyes is speaking to me. By Kami, there is no way this can be real. Child. Weak, pathetic child. This is very real. You had better accept this soon, or else you will not only break in exquisite ways, but also die very horribly. I am here due to the fox's unstable way he healed your eyes. The simple truth, now that I am here, is that you will either grow to be just as powerful as the demon behind you, or you will die very soon. Naruto stood still as the truth of what was being said, and the beings here could not be denied. Over several minutes his emotions played across his face until he finally sighed as his mind fully accepted the reality before him. Slowly raising his head to the eyes that had not moved since they first spoke, his mouth opened and closed in a fish-like manner before he got a hold of himself and swallowed. What are you? Though no change could be seen, Naruto and the Kyuubi both felt as if the eyes had just grinned like the Cheshire Cat with such demonic power that the fox took a step back. You may call me Jagan. As several minutes passed, Naruto gathered himself together from the unsettling aura the eyes had given off. During this time the Kyuubi remained silent, watching and considering. Scratching his head in thought, he put the information together in his head before continuing the conversation. The Jagan eye never moved or spoke, choosing to remain still in a way that in any other situation would be extremely unsettling. Naruto took a deep breath before looking up at the eyes before he decided to speak. I understand about the Kyuubi now, or at least a lot more than what I did before. You, on the other hand. Jagan. What does that mean? Is that your name or what you are? What did you mean when you said I'd die if I didn't get stronger? Your death is assured, for it is the law of nature. The strong survive while the weak perish. As you are now, you are nothing more than a sheep that knows its teeth can be used to do more than chew grass. As for your second question, the answer is one and the same. Jagan is that it is a dujitsu. Unlike other bloodlines that come about because of a demon merging with its host, this one would be termed artificial. I am a result of the fox's inept attempt to regenerate your eyes. Despite his ineptitude, he by accident has accomplished something that those who are far better have failed to do for millennia. Any offspring you may have will be born with the Jagan as what you would call a bloodline limit. The Kyuubi had started to emit a low growl at the backhanded compliments, growing increasingly angry due to the blows to his pride. Naruto, oblivious to this, stood in a thinking pose as he took in what the Jagan had said. Suddenly a light bulb went off over Naruto's head. That means I have eye powers like the Sharingan. Oh man, that Tem is going to be so pissed. He said laughingly, holding his stomach. You dare compare me to such a pathetic thing as the Sharingan? All that does is allow weak creatures to stay weak by mimicking the strong to survive. To gain any of my powers you will have to prove your worth to me. I will not allow a weak being to possess my power. Realizing that the dragon was not something to piss off, especially since it was inside his head, and could do only Kami knows what, Naruto decided to act in a more respectful manner. If that means I have to train to become even stronger, then let's get started. The sooner I gain your power, the quicker I can get stronger, and become Hokage. Naruto said with his biggest grin and his fingers held in the V for victory pose. Those are strong words, boy. We will see if your conviction is a match for your mouth. Just remember one thing. Begging for death will not absolve you of training. Naruto swallowed hard at this, but then burst into a wide grin. No sweat. Not even Anbu can beat me. Wrong, boy. They couldn't. Now they can. As you are now, that banshee bitch could destroy you in a fight. You will only grow stronger through blood, sweat, and tears. Lots and lots of blood. Hey, leave Sakura out of this. She isn't that bad. As it hit him as to what else was said, his eyes turned angry and confused. What do you mean she could beat me? She is the weakest out of our graduating class. Naruto said with his arms crossed, and a glower on his face. The implantation of the dragon has striped you down to genin level. Looking up, Kyuubi thought to himself. In hindsight, I should never have let Mizuki place those limiter seals on the kit. You allowed what? The mightiest of the Biju indeed. You are nothing more than a pathetic excuse for a mass of chakra. To do something as petty as allowing that to happen to your host is unforgivable. The eyes began floating towards the Kyuubi. As they grew nearer, the dragon was surrounded by flames that appeared to be made of pure darkness. The flames continued to grow until they were around 5 feet tall, and the dragon was within arm's reach of the bars. Since you are a part of this fiasco, you will help to rectify the situation. You can start by giving us the memories of when the limiter seals were placed. The Kyuubi, though slightly unnerved by the flames, grew angrier at being addressed by the dragon in such a way. How dare you speak to me like that? I am the Kyuubi no Yoko, the greatest of the Biju. Show proper respect before I devour you. Proper respect. You claim to be the greatest of the Biju, but you are nothing but a pathetic overinflated chakra balloon. As the Kyuubi listened, his eyes narrowed dangerously. At being called a chakra balloon, his pride could not take any more and stuck out at the dragon with his claws extended. As his claws met the fire, he let out a roar of pain, quickly withdrawing his paw back into the cage. Looking at his paw, the Kyuubi was shocked at the damage that had been done. One of his claws was gone, as was a lot of fur. Where the fur once was could be seen a mass of burns. Focusing his chakra to heal quickly, he was surprised to see a very slow progress when it should have been near instantaneous. Deciding to err on the side of caution until he knew more about the dragon, he acquiesced for now. The memories are of no consequence, but they were not all you had in mind. What else is there? Having made his point, the dragon floated back to his position about halfway between the cage and Naruto. Still trying to understand what was happening, Naruto was wisely remaining silent as he watched the confrontation, knowing it would be a bad idea to piss either one of these creatures off. Being as old as you are, I assume you know how to make chakra cuffs. Not the ones the shinobi use to hold prisoners, but the ones that increase a person's chakra control and reserves. I want you to give that knowledge to Naruto so he can make them and wear them as soon as possible. Kyuubi was quite taken aback by this, as no one had used chakra cuffs of this sort in several hundred years, and had thought the knowledge of their existence was lost during the last demon-human war 150 years prior to the first great ninja war. Taking his eyes from dragon, he studied Naruto for a moment before replying slowly. Such a tool would be of great advantage, and will most definitely make the kit stronger. There is one condition for my assistance in this. At this, Kyuubi's eyes seemed to bore into Naruto in a way that he knew he would not be able to avoid, whatever the condition was. You will be the avatar of my revenge on the one responsible for my humiliation. It will be by your hand that he dies. So saying, Kyuubi shoved the knowledge into Naruto, making him dizzy enough to fall onto his butt as his mind sorted the information. It's a good thing that was done in your mindscape. If Kyuubi had done that without you being here, it would have knocked you unconscious for several hours. As you know, your eyes are much more perceptive than they once were, but that is not all they are capable of. I will train you in the other functions of them when you are ready. Tomorrow you will make the chakra cuffs, and start training with them. If anyone asks, they are some bracers that caught your eye in town, and decided to buy them. Your training will also involve shadow clones, as it will help with your control since their knowledge and experiences return to you when they are deactivated. If you train right, you will be able to give a Jonin a run for his money by the time your chakra reserves return to what they once were. Our time grows short, so listen well. When you return to Konoha, tell the Hokage about the limiter seals. They can be seen on the back of your neck. Also, if anyone asks about the change in your eyes, tell them it is because of your increased healing factor, unless it is someone that knows about you being a Jinchuriki. In that case, you will tell them it is a side effect of housing the Kyuubi, much like all the other Jinchuriki have from their guests. It nears the time for your shift to be relieved. Go get some sleep, and in the morning your training will begin. With that being said, Kyuubi kicked Naruto out of his mindscape. Opening his eyes, Naruto could see that over an hour had passed, and Sakura was approaching for the shift change. Getting up, he waved at her, letting her know everything had been quiet, and headed inside, eager to begin his new training. The Jagan stared at where Naruto had faded away from for a few minutes before turning to look at the Kyuubi, who at this point had turned to lay down for some sleep. Slowly the Jagan floated to the cage with small flames of pure darkness, the likes of which had not been seen since before creation, when all of existence was the void. After a brief time, a thin jet of the flame lashed out like a whip, all but flaying the chakra beast in the process. Who said we were done? You and I have much yet to discuss. The Jagan said in a voice that was eerily devoid of emotion, considering the actions that had just taken place. Your chakra will be used to correct the failures you have done out of blind pride. Your foolishly prideful habit of merely healing Naruto to his current state instead of improving him to be a worthy embodiment for us will no longer be allowed. You may be satisfied with such a pitiful host, but I am beyond such petty things. We will alter him so that he is more fitting for a being of my stature. We will start the enhancements of his physical condition now, as well as increasing the number of chakra pathways to his brain to increase his mental fortitude. The Kyuubi growled as he thought to himself, I have no choice to do as this impudent whelp says for now. He can get to me while I cannot get to him, but soon a time will come when that will change. The next morning found Naruto walking into the village to get the supplies he needed for the chakra cuffs, as well as a list of things Kakashi said they needed to resupply with. Although the village itself was almost unchanged, the people were much happier, and walked with none of the fear that could be seen just a few days earlier. Over the next hour he had walked into several stores trying to find what he needed with no success, and as the day wore on his progress slowed due to the villagers offering gifts and cheers to their hero. At first Naruto welcomed the attention, it quickly became an annoyance as his frustration grew. Finally, walking into a blacksmith's shop to escape the crowds, he saw a few of the items he needed. Gathering the items that he found, he walked over to the clerk. Will that be all today, sir? Yeah, unless you know where I can find the rest of the things on this list. Naruto said as he showed the list. I don't have any of that here, but there is a shop a few streets over that has most if not all of what you need. The owner picked up a lot of things like that from when we raided Gato's hideout after his death. After receiving directions and paying the bill, Naruto headed to the shop, eager to get back so he could train. A week later, after having set up camp for the night, Naruto could be seen rummaging through his pack as Sakura and Haku were cooking dinner. Pulling out a scroll he had forgotten about, he suddenly grinned before approaching Haku with the scroll behind his back. Having noticed Naruto getting closer, Sakura got a tick mark on her forehead, knowing all too well about his appetite. It's not ready yet, Baka. So go sit down and wait like everyone else, Sakura said, waving a ladle at him. Smirking, Naruto moved toward the side of the table Haku was at as he replied without looking at Sakura. If I want to rent billboard space, I'll let you know, but I have better things to do right now. Sakura caught off guard, but such an Naruto comment is in shock for a moment, until the sounds of Sasuke, Kakashi, and Zabuza laughing reached her ears. clenching her fist hard enough to make the ladle creak in protest as inner Sakura raged at Naruto. Giggling at the exchange, Haku glances up from preparing the meal. She sees Naruto walking towards her with a mischievous smirk, and his blue eyes twinkling in mirth, causing a slight blush to grace her cheeks. Feeling the heat on her face, she ducks her head, trying to focus on the food in front of her instead of the shrinking distance between her and her newfound crush. "Oh, Haku-chan, I have a surprise for you," Naruto said in an innocently seductive tone of voice, causing Haku to go as rigid as a post. Haku's eyes flew wide open, and her blush returned, so powerfully that a certain Hyuga would be jealous, as she heard Naruto speak in a way that had been making her dreams especially enjoyable the last few days. The responses from the males of the group to hearing Naruto's way of addressing Haku, though varied, were along very similar paths. Kakashi raised an eyebrow before smiling with a giggle usually only heard when his face was buried in a certain orange book. Sasuke stared at Naruto for a moment before shaking his head and mumbling to himself, "Dobi." Zabuza's was the most pronounced, but understandable considering his realization of how Haku was like a daughter to him, and the overprotectiveness that went along with it. A scowl appeared on his face just as suddenly as his laughter shut off. Fingering his sword, Zabuza began walking over to the kids with a quietness only a master assassin could use. Softly, Naruto lifts Haku's face so she is looking him in the eyes, smiling at her in such a way that she is unable to turn her head. Unbeknownst to the boy, Zabuza was standing less than a foot behind him with his sword ready to sever his head if he saw a sign he was thinking with the wrong brain. Still smiling, Naruto holds out the scroll. "You really shouldn't hide such a beautiful face, Haku-chan. Here is a present that might help you display an equally beautiful side of yourself," he said in a tone of voice that was filled with innuendo. While Kakashi was making a note to himself to remember that line for future use, Zabuza stood as still as a rock, wondering at the blonde midget, since Naruto sure as hell wasn't player material from what he had seen before now. After having noticed the blood seal on the scroll, Zabuza put his sword away before coughing to get their attention. "You'll have to use some blood to open that, Haku. It is locked with a blood seal." Blinking a few times to get a hold of herself upon hearing Zabuza cough, Haku blushed, and carefully took the scroll, thankful for a chance to clear the thick fog that had seemed to envelope her brain. Inspecting the scroll, she saw what her adopted father meant. Biting her thumb just enough to cause a few drops of blood to flow, she drew the bloody digit across the seal, hoping it worked, since seals of this kind were usually set to specific blood signatures. After several seconds, the lines of the seal began to shift and flow over the scroll before settling into a new shape that turned out to be words. Clear as day in bold print could be seen the words, "Hyouden Bloodline Skills, and Other Jutsu." Saying that Haku was shocked was like saying that Kakashi liked to read porn once in a while. Holding in her hands a tangible connection to her family for the first time since her mother died. After a moment, her hands began to shake as her emotions began to overwhelm her. Wet spots appeared on the scroll as tears began flowing from her eyes before she suddenly tackles Naruto to the ground, kissing him full on the lips, shocking everyone there. Breaking the kiss, she hugs Naruto tightly, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you," over and over, feeling Naruto's arms wrap gently around her as her tears soaked his shoulder. Sasuke actually unfolded his arms and leaned forward in unabashed surprise at what had just happened. Kakashi merely smiled before pulling his headband back down, covering his Sharingan eye. Sakura was not just surprised, she was stunned. What she had just seen was so far out of what she thought was possible that she let the ladle slip to the ground unnoticed. By the time the ladle hit the ground, however, inner Sakura was ranting in a very Yosemite Sam fashion before stomping over to a chalkboard and placing a hash mark under Naruto's name. On the board, the names of the rest of the Konoha 12 inches could be seen, as well as large letters stating, "Successful seduction attempts." Sighing deeply at the blank space by her name, she turns to a near-identical chalkboard that says, "Failed seduction attempts." Aside from the title, the major difference between the two was that Naruto was the only one with success points, while Ino and Sakura had over 100 failed points each. Several long moments passed before Haku stopped crying and stood up. With her head down, and her eyes on the scroll, she made a decision as Naruto brushed himself off. Pocketing the scroll, she wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck and kissed him deeply. After a long enough time to leave the boy short of breath, Haku smiled, looking into his eyes. "You have no idea how much this means to me, Naruto Koi," she said coyly before walking over to her tent with a sway in her hips that left Naruto unable to look away. After that eventful dinner, Naruto and Haku were seldom seen far apart, and spent much of the trip to Konoha talking with each other. Even with this being the case, they had not shared another kiss or even hugged each other. Instead, they spent the time learning more about the other, and grew even closer. This is why they were almost shoulder to shoulder when they entered Konoha, with Naruto signing in for her before the group headed to the Hokage Tower to inform Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure. Within 15 minutes they were ushered into his office for debriefing, with Kakashi in the lead. As the Jonin took position in front of the Hokage's desk, Sakura sat in one of the chairs, Sasuke leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, Naruto stood between the couch and the desk with Haku at his side, and Zabuza plopped down on the other chair. Despite all the assurances she had gotten on the way back from Nami no Kuni, Haku was very nervous, and clasped Naruto's hand. Feeling the grip, he turned to her with a half smile and a gentle squeeze of her hand. Haku let a small smile grace her lips as she looked into Naruto's eyes. As she gazed into his eyes, she couldn't help but become lost in their depths, in a way that could certainly be similar to how someone feels when their soul enters the afterlife peacefully, only to be brought back to reality with a sudden cough from the aging Hokage. Blushing enough that the Hyuga air would be tough to beat without fainting, she shyly hid behind Naruto, taking hold of his arm from behind, and causing Zabuza to snort in mirth. Naruto gently patted Haku's hand, reassuringly telling her not to worry, and that he'd protect her with such strength that Sarutobi couldn't help smiling at the interaction. Pushing the thoughts of his adopted grandson's love life aside for future contemplation, he coughed again before speaking. "From what I can tell, the mission debriefing will be full of surprises, so why don't you get started, Kakashi?" the old man said with authority. "Hi, Hokage-sama," the Cyclopean pervert said before going into an in-depth debriefing that lasted over an hour. When it was all said and done, Sasuke was dozing in the same position he was in when they entered. Sakura looked extremely bored, Zabuza was looking intently at the Hokage trying to discern his reaction, and Naruto was holding an obviously nervous Haku while whispering into her ear. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair, puffing on his pipe for several moments in thought with his fingers interlocked. "Your team did exceptionally well under the circumstances, and it is amazing they are even alive after what happened. I am upgrading your mission from mid-C rank to upper A rank with the appropriate pay increase, as well as a bonus from the bounty for the Demon Brothers. I am also giving your team a week's vacation from missions to relax and recover. Each of you have earned it and you should all be proud. Now on to other matters, Naruto, seeing as how you started the ball rolling, I want your opinion." Naruto nodded, and smiled at Haku before addressing Sarutobi. "Gigi, I trust Haku-chan and Zabuza enough to tell them about the furball," he said with a look and tone as serious as getting your balls caught in razor wire. Sarutobi merely raised an eyebrow at the teen despite his enormous surprise at hearing this. Taking the time, he slowly weighed first Zabuza, and then Haku before bringing his eyes back to Kakashi, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. The Hokage took a long drag off his pipe before sighing deeply. "It's decided then," he said with a finality that could only be matched by the sound of dirt as it hits the top of a coffin as it's being buried. "Zabuza, Haku, you have gained Naruto's trust, and that is something not even a handful of people have done. I trust his judgment, and as such I am laying my faith on him, and his trust in you. There are also certain guidelines that have to be followed as well. Zabuza, you will have to undergo questioning by our I&T department, which I trust you will oblige any of their questions. After your cooperation you will be put on probation for 3 months, and if mine and Naruto's trust is shown to be well placed, you will be instated as a shinobi of Konoha with the rank of Jonin." Before continuing, he took note of the smile Haku gave Zabuza, and the way she hugged Naruto. "Haku, since you are being sponsored by and are under the protection of Naruto, you will be given an apartment near his while you are under probation for the same 3 months as Zabuza. During which time your skills will be accessed to a great degree, and should you prove true to what has been said here you will awarded rank according to your skill, which if I have not misheard is at the very least mid-chunin. At this point Sarutobi set his pipe on the desk and leaned forward, his entire demeanor now one of deadly seriousness with some key added. Be warned. If you betray Naruto or bring him any harm I will destroy you. He said in a voice that was devoid of emotion. Haku's eyes widened in fear, and nearly wet herself as she shook like a leaf in a hurricane. Her breathing increased to near hyperventilating levels as she felt the ki being focused on her, and nearly had a heart attack as she felt the power a cage could bring to bear. Feeling arms wrap around her she jerked her head in fright to see who it was, only to relax seeing the blonde smile at her as he tightened his arms around her. Without even thinking about it she gave Naruto a peck on the cheek before bowing deeply to the man known as Shinobi no Kami. You have nothing to worry about, Hokage-sama. I will never betray or harm Naruto-kun. If I ever do you can be assured that I will die by my own hand. Haku said solemnly from her near genuflecting position. Sarutobi nodded to himself satisfied with her answer, and opened up a drawer bring out the needed documents. Once they were filled out he put the ones Haku and Zabuza had done in the to be processed pile, and handed Kakashi the pay receipts to make sure Team 7 was paid correctly. Once that was done he relaxed back into his chair puffing on his pipe. Now that that is taken care of all that remains is for you to be shown where you will be living. Kakashi, I want you to accompany Naruto and Haku back to the complex, and speak with the landlady about her new apartment next to Naruto's. If she has any questions send her to me, and I will deal with them. For now, Zabuza, you will have to be taken to Anbu headquarters for the questioning. Once that is done I will make arrangements for your own place to live. You are dismissed. With everyone filing out of the room, and Zabuza being escorted by an Anbu, Sarutobi turned back to the bane of his existence, paperwork. Haku and Naruto followed Kakashi to the apartment complex talking with each other as the Jonin remained silent except for the occasional perverted giggle as he read his orange book. As they walked Naruto would point out some of the landmarks along their way telling her about each one. Despite her joy at walking hand in hand with the one who had stolen her heart her mood grew darker the longer they walked. The reason for this is that she was noticing the looks that Naruto was receiving from the villagers. At first she had dismissed it until she had overheard some of the comments that were made about the demon brat. Having not only experienced his power firsthand, but also told about his burden she knew who they were talking about, and it was really starting to piss her off. How can they say that about Naruto-kun? He is more of an angel than a demon. She thought, blushing even with the scowl that had managed to show on her porcelain visage. It's okay, Haku-chan, just ignore them. Naruto said softly as he brought her hand to his lips kissing the back of it softly. Haku smiled coyly at the open display of affection before a look of concern appeared. Are you sure, Naruto-kun? Yes I am sure, Yukiana-hime. True they make things rough for me at times, but they won't do anything since I am a ninja, and they don't want to face Gigi's wrath. He said with a foxy grin. Haku found an intense heat form on her cheeks at his pet name, and interlaced her fingers with his trying to hide the fact her inner pervert had reared its head at his grin. While she fought with her reproductive instincts she didn't notice that they had arrived at the complex until Naruto had stopped her. Seeing that he had a hand on each of her arms and was standing in front of her smiling in a way that brought a flash of heat to her abdomen she involuntarily stepped into his arms and rested her head on his shoulder. Kakashi-sensei has gone in to talk with the landlady. Why don't I show you my place and I can get you something to eat or some tea if you want? He said with his arms around her waist. She nodded, reluctant to leave his arms, but followed him up the stairs to the 3rd floor. With the door unlocked he paused to smile at her apologetically. My place is a bit messy right now. I didn't have time to clean it before the mission, and it's been almost a month. With that said he opened the door, and gestured for her to take a seat on the couch. Which kind of tea would you like? I have green, gen my cha, and of course sencha. He asked as he set a kettle to boil on the stove. Gen my cha sounds good, Naruto-kun, she said as she looked around the small bachelor pad. The living room was not as messy as he made it out to be, and was furnished spartanly with one 3-person couch, a short table that looked like it had been made from a root portion of a tree as a base with a couple cushions under it, and some pictures on the wall of his team, the Hokage, and some people at a ramen stand. At the back of the apartment was a door that was slightly ajar, letting her see that it was the bedroom. Between the kitchen and the bedroom was another door that she assumed was the bathroom. After a few minutes she heard the sounds of tea being poured. Shortly Naruto returned holding 2 cups of tea, and handed her one before sitting down on the couch next to her. They sat in companionable silence for a while, each sipping their tea, until there was a knock on the door. Naruto set his cup on the table before getting up to answer the door. "Come on in, Kakashi-sensei," he said, standing to the side so the leader of Team 7 could enter. Kakashi walked over to Haku, and held out a scroll and a key for her. "This is the key to the apartment next door, as well as the information on when and where you will be tested. Since we have a week off, I expect Naruto to help you assimilate to life here, and answer any questions you might have. Also, you will not be allowed to use your skills except in self-defense until your status here has been finalized. As such, Naruto will act as your bodyguard until you have been officially instated as a ninja of Konoha." While he spoke, Naruto had retaken his seat next to Haku, and resumed sipping his tea. When Kakashi had finished, Naruto took Haku's hand in his. "Don't worry, nothing will happen to her on my watch." The Jonin, having noticed Naruto's change in behavior ever since the bridge battle, had not missed how the two interacted, and wondered if the change was because of her or something more sinister. Unsure how to broach the subject, he resolved to talk with the Hokage about it and just watch for now. "Anyo, what about Otu-san?" Haku said hesitantly as she pulled Naruto's hand into her lap, and placing her other hand over his. "Zabuza. If he cooperates with Anbu, he should be released in a few days. After that, it depends on what Hokage-sama decides to do. Just be patient, and I'm sure you'll see him soon. In the meantime, just relax, and get to know your way around here. Don't forget to be at the appointed places on time for your testing. Naruto, we will resume team functions at the usual place and time in 7 days." With that said, he walked back to the door, but stopped halfway through before speaking over his shoulder. "By the way, try not to make Haku too sore to do the tests properly, and don't do anything I wouldn't do," he said with an eye smile before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Haku, who had started to sip her tea once again, began choking at his parting words, with her face red enough to cause a certain Hyuga girl to ask for pointers. Naruto simply laughed, being used to much worse from the 2 demonic entities that resided within him. After handing Haku a towel, he grinned slyly, deciding to tease her a bit. "Since you have an interest in medical jutsu, soreness shouldn't be an issue." Haku froze for a second, slowly turning her head to look at Naruto. After a few seconds, a thoughtful look overtook her face, as if she was scanning through a list of remedies, causing Naruto to fall off the couch in laughter. That night, Naruto found himself back in front of the Kyuubi's cage with the Jagan hovering to his right. "Please don't tell me this is about more training," he grumbled, not wanting to go through another Hell Week like he did in Wave. "No, this is not about training, but something just as important, if not more so. You have been brought here to learn about your parents," the Jagan said, slowly circling Naruto. "My parents? You mean you know who they were? Yada," he yelled, and jumped in the air. "Yes, we know whose genetics you share. Between Kyuubi's knowledge from his previous hosts and our study of your body as we began fixing some flaws, we have figured out who they are." Naruto had not been this enthused since he had first tasted ramen from Ichiraku's after he had been kicked out of the orphanage, and danced around the dank room until he was brought to a stop by Kyuubi. "Enough. Sit your down or we won't tell you shit," the 9-tailed fox roared, causing Naruto to stop dead still, and sit on what looked like a broken piece of concrete. "I'll be good," he said with the same look and tone a child would use when promised a new toy if they were quiet for 5 minutes. The easiest part to figure out was who your father was. You were nearly identical to him in looks, and if you thought about it you would know who it is without help. Your father was Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, and the same person that sealed that overgrown rug inside you. Your mother was a little harder to figure out, but there are only a few possibilities considering you are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. As it turns out, you are not only related to one Hokage but three. Your mother is the granddaughter of the Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju. By looking through your memories we were able to find out her name as well as a few other things that were mentioned in your time spent at the academy. Your mother is Tsunade Senju of the Densetsu no Sannin. Naruto, like anyone else in his position, was as stunned as if Kami herself showed up and offered to give him a blowjob. His mouth was agape, and his eyeballs looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He sat there for several long minutes before he was able to form coherent words. Are you seriously telling me that I am the son of the man that almost single-handedly ended the Third Great War, and literally the strongest kunoichi in the ninja world? Yes we are, Kit. Even though this explains a few things, it brings up even more questions. Ones you should be asking the old man about. Naruto could only nod dumbly in response as he tried to keep his brain from melting from the information. I'll do that first thing tomorrow. Make sure that you do. The Jagan said before kicking Naruto out of the mindscape. The next morning Naruto rushed through his morning rituals intent on being at the Hokage's office as soon as possible. In short order he arrived at the Hokage's office, and walked in to sit in one of the chairs, staying silent the whole time. Sarutobi was caught off guard by this as Naruto was never silent like this before. Good morning, Naruto. Is there something I can help you with? He asked as he wondered what had happened to put the boy in the mood he was in. Naruto looked at the old man for a few moments before nodding to himself. You can tell me why you have lied all these years. Needless to say, the Hokage was at a loss hearing this, and voiced his confusion. What do you mean, Naruto, and why do you think I've been lying to you? The teen took a deep breath before exhaling slowly. I want to know why you kept the identities of my parents secret, and forced me to live like I have. You know who they are, and yet you've kept it from me. Tell me why my mother left me alone even though she lives on. Sarutobi's eyes widened at this since he didn't know who his mother was. Honestly, I do not know who your mother is. I only know that your father was Namikaze Minato. I have tried my best to care for you despite the trouble the council gives me. As for why I didn't tell you, it was for your own safety. Your father had many enemies both outside and inside the village. If it was known your life would be in danger every day, and Iwa or Kumo may have even declared war on us just to kill you. Giving Naruto time to process this information, he took his time filling and lighting his pipe. After puffing a few times he voiced the question that had been screaming in his mind. Do you really know who your mother is, Naruto? Naruto nodded, both in acceptance of what he had been told as well as in answer to the question. Yes, I do. How I found out I won't tell you, but it can be verified with a simple blood test. He closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. You know my mother quite well. Gigi. She was your student after all. Senju Tsunade Konoha no Namakuji Haim, and member of the Densetsu no Sannin. Sarutobi was dumbfounded at this, and only his long years of experience prevented him from gaping like a fish. After several minutes he shook himself, and gave of a small burst of chakra, causing one of his Anbu guards to appear. I want you to go to the hospital, and tell Dr. Fukazawa I want him in my office immediately. When the Anbu had left, the old man turned to Naruto. The man I sent him after is my personal physician. What you have told me needs to be verified before we can do anything about it. When he has brought me the results, we'll talk about it more then. Don't worry about having to give any blood for this since it is already on file from all the time you spent in the hospital. Don't let this eat at you, Naruto. We will get this straightened out, so go have fun with Haku, alright? Alright, Gigi, Naruto said, standing up. I'll send the bill for Haku's shopping like we agreed upon. A short time later the Anbu returned with the doctor, who Sarutobi gestured to sit while he addressed the Anbu once again. I will need you to get Zabuza from INT so I can speak with him. Bring him in as soon as I am done with this meeting, and then tell Hyuga Hiyashi to meet me tomorrow. Haku and Naruto spent most of the time over the next week together, hardly ever separating for more than the night when they went to bed. Naruto had shown her around town, helped her shop for things she needed for her new place, and introduced her to the Ichirakus as well as some of the other genin from the Rookie 9. For the most part things had been uneventful with the notable exception of the first time they had visited the Yamanaka flower shop. Naruto had brought her there with her interest in plants in mind, and she was suitably impressed with what they had in stock as well as the knowledge Mrs. Yamanaka had about each of the plants in her store. They had been there for over 30 minutes when Ino walked in after her team's activities. "Ka-san, I'm home," she yelled as she entered the store. "How was your day, hun?" her mother asked from the counter, turning from watching Naruto and Haku peruse the goods. "It was okay. Choji ate all the time as usual, and Shika played shogi with Asuma-sensei again. After that we did AD rank for Mrs. Tsukimura. How has business been?" "It's been good." As a matter of fact, Mrs. Yamanaka gestured for her daughter to get closer in a conspiratorial way as she shared her daughter's gossiping gene. "One of your old classmates is here with his girlfriend," she said in a whisper, pointing to the pale beauty and the blonde. Ino quickly took in the long black hair, pale pink kimono, and pale beauty of the girl, feeling a pang of jealousy at just how much she looked like a goddess come to earth. When her eyes landed on the boy next to her, Ino's jaw dropped. Right before her eyes was the dead last, with what was undoubtedly the most beautiful girl she had ever seen. Her eyes nearly fell out of her head when she saw Naruto pick up a flower for the girl to look at only to get a kiss in return. She stood looking like a stepped-on frog until her mother poked her in the ribs. "Why are you so shocked, Ino? I think they look great together. Just like the sun and the moon," said Mrs. Yamanaka, laughing inwardly at her daughter's reaction. But it's Naruto. He's the dead last, and class clown. How in the name of Kami did he get a girl like that?" she exclaimed, drawing the attention of her fellow genin. "Hey, Ino, long time no see," he said as he walked over hand in hand with Haku. "Apparently longer than I thought it had been. Why don't you introduce me to your friend, Naruto?" she said, looking them over with her gossip eye. "Ah, Gomen, allow me to introduce you. Yamanaka Ino, I'd like you to meet Yuki Haku. She is new to Konoha, and will joining as a kunoichi after she has been evaluated by the old man. Yuki Haku, this is Yamanaka Ino, heir of the Yamanaka clan, local gossip queen, and vice president of the Thames fan club." While Ino's eyes narrowed at the reference to Sasuke, Haku bowed formally and with perfect etiquette addressed Ino. "It is an honor to meet you, Yamanaka-san. Naruto-kun has told me much about your time together at the academy." Ino, caught off guard by such formality, replied just as she was trained to as a clan heir. "It is an honor to meet you as well, Yuki-san. I trust you find Konoha to your liking. Hyatt is a great village, but it does have a few dissatisfactory issues," Haku said with a slight glint in her eyes. Naruto slipped his arm around her waist, gently pulling her to his side. "I've told you not to worry about that, Yuki-Anaheim." Ino raised her eyebrows at this, especially when Haku rested her head on his shoulder and gave a soft sigh. "Wow, no one will believe this without seeing it themselves. I have to call forehead as soon as I can. So you two are an item. How did you meet?" she asked, entering full gossip queen mode. Naruto and Haku shared a glance before he spoke. "I had fallen asleep from training in a clearing when Haku-chan showed up to gather herbs for a sick relative. We talked as I helped her, and hit it off," he said, slightly shrugging his unoccupied shoulder. "Really now, so what attracted you to the knucklehead?" Ino said to Haku, her interest clearly showing. Haku smiled at Naruto, who scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "He has a heart of gold, will do anything for his precious people, is strong, and not to mention he has ungodly stamina," she said, thinking about the fight on the bridge. Ino, however, mistook what she said for something else entirely, and widened her eyes in shock. "What a sec, ungodly stamina, does that mean?" She thought to herself, blushing furiously, and thought of a way to change the subject. Did I hear right that you are going to be a ninja here? Hi. Hokage-sama said that my skills need to be evaluated so that he can place me at the proper rank, since I was never officially part of a hidden village, and was trained by my Otou-san. Haku raised her head and looked at Naruto. That reminds me, we still need to go shopping for the gear I need. It's okay, I know just the place we can go. It's the best place to get equipment from, and they never overcharge either. He said with a smile. I hope you don't mind, but I also made reservations for dinner tonight at one of the better Akimichi restaurants. Of course I don't mind, Naruto-kun. I actually prefer we do it tonight, since I have to meet Hokage-sama the day after tomorrow for the testing. Then why don't we finish shopping then head home so we can get ready? The reservations are for 1800 hours, and we should both dress semi-formal at the least. Naruto said, checking the time via a clock on the wall behind the counter. With the conversation over, they bid Ino farewell, and headed out the door. Ino stared after them for a few minutes before running up to her room, and grabbing the phone. After a few rings, Sakura picked up on the other end. Moshi Moshi Haruno residence, the pink-haired girl said. Hey, forehead, you are not going to believe what just happened at my family's shop. She said in a voice thick with juicy gossip yet to be told. What happened? Sakura asked, not missing the tone one bit. Naruto was just in here with a gorgeous girl that he seems to be dating. What? Naruto has a girlfriend? No way. Oh yeah, and if what this Haku girl said is true, they are already sleeping together. Nani? Naruto is sleeping with Haku? I don't believe it, Sakura said in a now very irate voice. Ino caught the anger in the pinket's voice and smirked. What's wrong? Billboard brow, are you jealous? What? Hell no. Haku was one of the ninja we fought on our last mission. Look, why don't you come over and I'll tell you all about, Ino pig. Okay, I'll be right over after I shower. Give me about half an hour. Alright, I'll see you then. Bye, Sakura said before hanging up the phone. The next morning, after Ino had gone back home, Sakura made her way over to Naruto's apartment. Seeing as it was mid-morning, she thought he would be at home and knocked on the door. Getting no response, she knocked harder, and repeated the cycle for almost 10 minutes, and grew more pissed each time she knocked on the door. Naruto, open the door. I know you. In there, you baka. The pink-haired banshee screamed. Just as she was about to kick the door in, the one next door opened up to reveal Naruto standing there in a pair of sweatpants, barefoot, and with no shirt on. Geez, Sakura, what's your problem? Sakura looked back and forth a few times from the door he was at to the one she was in front of with a look of confusion on her face. Isn't this your place? She asked, pointing to the now dented door. Yeah, that's my apartment. What of it? He asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Just as she was about to ask why he was in that apartment instead of his, a pair of pale slim arms wrapped around his waist. Who is it? Naruto-kun. A very feminine voice said as a head covered in long black hair came to rest on his shoulder, and the person was wearing a short-sleeve robe that stopped just above the knee. It's Sakura, and I don't know why she's yelling and trying to break my door in. He said before kissing the upturned cheek of the girl behind him. So why are you here, Sakura? We still have 2 more days, till we have to report in. Sakura shook her head at the scene before her, unable to believe it. You really are sleeping together? She said, totally dumbfounded. Haku raised her head to look at Sakura, still half asleep. Is that why you woke us up, Sakura-san? She asked, merely getting a nod in response. Yes, we have slept together. Now if that is all I need to get more sleep, seeing as we were still awake at dawn. Come on, Naruto-kun, let's go back to bed, she said before heading back inside with a slight limp as her foot was asleep. Sakura's eyes opened wider and wider as Haku spoke, totally stunned, and could only manage to lift her hand in reply to a quick wave from Naruto before he shut the door again. She stood there for a good 15 minutes before her brain rebooted, and she blinked rapidly as she assimilated the event that had just occurred. I wonder if Hinata knows about this. she said to herself as she walked down the stairs, still trying to come to terms with Naruto not only having a girlfriend, but one that was certainly the most beautiful girl in their age range, and possibly even the village. Sakura was walking through town still in a daze when she ran into Zabuza and Kakashi, and was stopped from doing it literally when the one-eyed pervert put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, Sakura?" he asked with obvious concern. She stared up at him for a minute before she came back to reality. "I'm sorry, what did you say, Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi glanced at Zabuza before leaning down closer to the girl's level. "I asked if you're okay. You were walking around in your own little world." "Oh, I'm fine, I just got one hell of a surprise is all," she said, trying to put her brain back in order. "Why don't you tell me about it? Maybe I can help," Kakashi said kindly. "I don't know what help you can give besides some things you picked up from constantly reading your pervert Bible," she said, not really paying attention to the conversation. Her sensei's one visible eye widened hearing this, and dropped down to look her in the eye. "What are you talking about, Sakura?" "I went to talk to Naruto this morning, and found out he has been sleeping with Haku," she said, not even realizing Zabuza was only a few feet from her. "What?" the one-armed man roared, emitting an intense blast of ki. Sakura started to back away, covering her mouth as what she had said and in front of who it was said hit her. Shit," she said, hoping that the demon of the mist didn't go on another killing spree. "The little shit is dead," Zabuza growled out as he began stomping toward Naruto's apartment, leaving 3-inch deep imprints every time he took a step, only to come to a dead stop after 20 feet. "When did the old man say the pervert was going to get here?" "Sometime in the next couple weeks." "Why?" the Jonin asked, not looking up from his book. Zabuza got a very evil grin on his face as he turned around. "I think me and Hiyashi need to have a little chat, especially considering how his little princess would do anything the Gaki asked." Kakashi actually looked up, his one eye widening. "You don't think Hinata would? Do you honestly think she would say no to Naruto?" Zabuza said with a pointed look. Sakura was lost, trying to understand what they were talking about as she watched Kakashi put his book away and shunshin away with Zabuza. She had actually made it to within a block of her house when she finally understood what Zabuza was talking about. "Naruto!" she yelled loud enough to cause an echo off of the Hokage monument. Hinata looked over the note that had been delivered by one of the branch family members last night, and wondered once again why Sakura wanted to meet her privately, as she walked onto training ground number 7. When she reached the clearing, she saw the pink-haired girl standing by the 3 training posts. "Oh, Ohio, Sakura-san. How or why, you this morning?" the white-eyed girl asked in her usual stutter when Naruto isn't around. "Ohio, Hinata," Sakura replied, hesitant to tell Hinata about Haku and Naruto. "You might want to sit down. I have something to tell you that you probably won't like." Hinata looked at the other girl with a worried look before slowly sitting down with her back against one of the training posts. "What is it? Has something happened to Naruto-kun?" Sakura nodded slowly and sat down in front of one of the other training posts. "Naruto is fine, but yes, it does involve him." She breathed deeply for a moment, not really wanting to tell the timid girl about what she had heard and seen. "I really don't know how to say this, but I feel that you should know." "I am sorry, Hinata, but you should know this since you feel the way you do about Naruto." Hinata's worry had grown with each word, and now was in tears, fearing what Sakura had to tell her. Her hands were clasped so tightly that blood had started to flow from where her fingernails were piercing the skin. "Hinata, I hate to say this, but you should give up on Naruto," the pink-haired girl said quietly as she looked away from the lavender-eyed girl. Hinata stared at the girl, dreading that her worst fear from the academy was true, but had to ask nonetheless. Why? What aren't you telling me, Sakura-san?" she asked with a shaky voice filled with all of her so far repressed emotions. Sakura sighed heavily before she slowly answered. "Naruto. He is involved with a girl from our last mission." The way the pinkett had spoken left no room for doubt, but Hinata just couldn't believe that her Naruto-kun would just pick up some girl like that. Naruto-kun isn't like that. There is no way I will believe that he is involved with some hussy. Hinata's voice had started out quiet, but it grew stronger with each word until she was all but shouting, and caused Sakura to stare at her like she had just grown 3 more heads. I saw them myself, Hinata, she said after getting over her surprise. When I went to talk with him the other day he was at her apartment, and they had just gotten out of bed. He was only wearing sweatpants, and she was in a short nightgown. She also walked with a slight limp. Sakura's expression and intonation conveyed the significance of the last bit of information. Hinata stared at the other girl with her Byakugan activating and deactivating unconsciously for several minutes, causing Sakura to get increasingly worried. If she had known what was going on inside the Hyuga girl's head she probably would have ran to Inoichi for help. Inside Hinata's head some of her fantasies of her and Naruto in a similar wardrobe to what Sakura had described were being torn asunder with the invasion of what she imagined this unknown girl to look like. Very soon her imagination began to alter, her imaginings twisting to match her inner turmoil. At first they were about Naruto finding love with another, but then quickly went downhill to him being the victim of some manipulative, abusive, uncaring whore that used her beloved Naruto as nothing more than a slave. It didn't help that she had nightmares like this before, with the only difference being that the girl had pink hair. When news of this day and spread, some would say that the Hyuga heir had a mental breakdown while others would say that she had just come out of her shell. After all, it's always the quiet ones, isn't it? Hinata slowly stood up with her Byakugan fully active, and faced the direction of Naruto's apartment. I will not allow some Jezebel to hurt my Naruto-kun. The previously timid girl growled out with a voice full of steel and the promise of blood soon to be spilled. I will protect him no matter what. Sakura's worry quickly turned to fear at hearing this, and had to wonder if telling her really was the right thing. As she watched Hinata storm off with a determination never seen before, she prayed to Kami-sama that nothing bad would happen from this. While Sakura was telling Hinata the life-altering news, the subject of their discussion was training in the woods behind the Hokage monument. With over 200 shadow clones broke up into 5 groups doing chakra control exercises, the man himself was taking a short break from his own training as determined by the Jagan. I wonder how Haku-chan's test is going. I know Gigi will be there, so I know whatever Jonin he picked won't do anything, but, Naruto sighed looking up at the sky, lost in his thoughts about his recently discovered bloodlines, and how they will affect Haku's opinion of him as well as that of the villagers. Many of the villagers openly hated, while others simply disliked him for his past pranks, and yet more acted as if he didn't even exist. Thanks to the Sandame's law and the mind's ability to disbelieve reality for something more logical and mentally acceptable, only a very few actually tried to hurt him. This by no means meant he had an easy life, but far from it actually. He was refused service at many stores, sold things at inflated prices at the few he could go into, and more often than not received subpar goods. Over the years his life had gotten a little better as people's hate slowly faded, but it was still far from where any normal orphan-turned-ninja was. As he pushed himself up to resume his training, he resolved to talk with Sarutobi about this in hopes his grandfather figure could help him. Meanwhile, Haku was at the designated training ground for her skill test, talking with the Hokage as they waited for the Jonin to appear. So, Haku, what do you think of Konoha so far? The old man asked as he puffed on his pipe. It is not what I expected, Hokage-sama. It is a lot more relaxed and peaceful than I thought it would be, except for a few things, the pale beauty said softly, thinking about the looks some of the villagers had directed at Naruto. Sarutobi took a moment to examine her, curious about her last statement. I hope no one caused you any trouble. I would like to know if anyone has, and I promise that it will be dealt with. Haku for her part didn't show any outward sign, but internally she was debating telling the Hokage that his village had so much hate for one so honorable as the boy she had fallen for so quickly. Finally she made up her mind, and told him about what she had seen. While most of the people were either indifferent or at least semi-friendly, there were a surprising number of people that showed such a level of hate that goes beyond that of being the victim of a prank, since I know none of Naruto-kun's pranks ever hurt anyone. He doesn't deserve their hate or the treatment he receives at most of the shops either. Hokage-sama, why is he treated like that still, and why is it still allowed? She inquired seriously, looking at Sarutobi. The old man sighed while looking into the bowl of his pipe, thinking about how to best address the issue before he spoke. As you probably already know, Naruto's parents died when the Kyuubi attacked. Sadly, the villagers you speak of are taking out their grief, hatred, anger, and loss out of Naruto because of the sealing of the fox his father did. You cannot tell anyone, as it is an S-class secret. I hope you understand my position on this, Haku, he said sadly, wishing there was someone who he could trust to succeed him so he could rest his old bones. I understand, Hokage-sama, she said, bowing deeply in respect, even though her voice made it plain that she disliked it more than just a little. It was at this time the Jonin that was supposed to be testing her stood up in a swirl of leaves caused by the well-known Shunshin technique. It was a slightly tall man with a senbon in his mouth, wearing the standard Jonin attire worn by many of the Jonin that were normally within the village. Ah, Genma, glad to see you. You can begin whenever you are ready, the oldest one there said with authority as he leaned back against a tree to watch the skill match. Haku bowed to Genma, slipping senbon into her hands as she did so. Shall we begin? Hinata was growing increasingly agitated, looking for Naruto. She had first gone to his apartment, but found that he wasn't home. Over the next several hours she scoured the town looking for him, hitting all his normal haunts. Ichiraku's, the academy, the Hokage Tower, and training ground 7 before she went over every inch of the market district. She was so thorough in her search that she had to rest a few times from keeping her Byakugan active, and not once did she see the telltale sign of red chakra that signaled Naruto's presence. Now it was nearing sundown, and decided to try one last place before trying his apartment again. If she still couldn't find him, then she decided to confront the Hokage himself. She made her way through the woods, following the trail up the back of the Hokage monument, not knowing that for once Naruto had used the stairs down the front of the monument when he realized the sun had started to set. Around 15 minutes after he left, Hinata appeared atop the monument, only finding traces that he had been there recently. With her jaw set, she hurried her way to Naruto's apartment. As she neared, she saw 2 chakra signatures in the apartment, one of which she immediately saw was Naruto, while she didn't recognize the other, and assumed it to be the girl Sakura had told her about. This thought enraged Hinata beyond the point of rational thought. Jumping from a rooftop onto the front porch, she kicked the door in, causing the doorframe to splinter since the deadbolt had been locked. At the sound, Haku, who had already showered and changed, and was now wearing a light knee-length dress and an apron, turned around with the chef's knife she was using to chop vegetables with in hand. Hinata's eyes narrowed at the girl as she stalked forward towards her prey. Seeing the aggressiveness of the one who had barged in, Haku took up a defensive stance, intent on capturing and interrogating this intruder. Stay away from my Naruto-kun, you. Hinata went to strike Haku with the Hyuga's Hake Sanjuni Sho, and was shocked when her assault was stopped by a hand gripping her wrist. Unknown to either of them, Naruto had heard the noise, and hopped out of the shower with just a towel wrapped around his waist. What the hell is going on here? Naruto asked, squeezing the wrist, slightly upset that had not only broke into his home, but also attacked Haku in the process. Granted, he was surprised it was the mouse of a girl known as Hinata, but since the girl he knew would never do something like this, he assumed it was a henge. Hinata had been shocked when her attack had been stopped, but was totally stunned by who it was. Her eyes wandered over the wet-muscled chest in front of her, not having heard the question Naruto had asked or the pressure on her wrist. The lavender-eyed heiress's eyes were jerked to his face when he yanked her wrist up, twisting it as he did so. What are you doing here? I won't ask again, he growled out, digging his thumb into the cluster of nerves just above the wrist joint. With the stab of pain received from her wrist, Hinata's eyes widened totally, and started to fill with tears at what she had done. Gomen, she cried as her body slumped in misery as she cried. Naruto looked over to Haku, confused at the turn of events, only to get a shrug in response. Sighing, he looked at Hinata, considering his options at this point. At a loss, he looked at Haku, hoping she had an idea, but got no help as she had went back to cooking. As luck would have it, a couple Anbu appeared at this point if the bandages on their hands were any indication. "Is everything all right, Uzumaki-san?" one of the masked men asked. "I'm not sure." For some reason Hinata broke in and attacked Haku-chan while she was making dinner. "I heard the noise, and rushed out of the shower in time to stop her attack. I had started to ask her why she broke in when you showed up," Naruto said, loosening his grip on the heiress. "I see. Can either of you confirm this?" the assumed leader of the group asked, looking at both of girls. Haku merely nodded her head, not wanting dinner to burn. Hinata's crying had slowed by this point as her shame grew. Hi, I did what he said. Hinata stuttered, paling as she started to realize the consequences of what she had done in her jealous rage. All of the Anbu looked at her in surprise, wondering what could cause the infamously shy Hyuga girl to snap like this. "We will take her from here, Uzumaki-san. With her confession, any repair costs will be covered by the Hyuga clan. Make sure that a copy of the bill is sent to the Hokage as well," the leader said as the other took her from Naruto. "Hi, Kumo-san," Naruto said to the bear-masked Anbu. "I'll make sure Gigi knows about it in the morning." The Anbu nodded in reply before they all disappeared via Shunshin. Naruto felt a breeze from their departure that reminded him he was wet and only wearing a towel. I'll get dressed and fix the door," he said with a slight blush, before he ran into the bedroom, not seeing the red on Haku's face that was not caused by the heat from the stove. A couple hours later, after they had eaten and washed the dishes, the pair were sitting on the couch cuddling as they listened to the music on the radio when there was a knock on the door. Curious as to who would be visiting them this late at night, Naruto got up to answer the door. "Hey, Gigi, what's up?" Naruto asked, wondering why the old man would come to his apartment like this. "Hi, Naruto. Mind if I come in?" Saratobi asked as he tapped his pipe against the railing to empty it of the ashes. "Sure, come on in," the teen said, standing aside so the Hokage could enter. "Hello, Hokage-sama," Haku said as she bowed, having stood up when he entered. "Ah, hello, Haku. I'm sorry to disturb you two so late, especially after your test, but there are a few things I need to talk to you about," he said, pulling up a chair. "Is this about Haku-chan's test?" "In part, Naruto. I was going to hold off on that until tomorrow, but with what I have heard I thought it best to pay you two a visit." The teens looked at each other, wondering what he had heard that would cause the Hokage to personally visit them so late at night. "Are we in trouble for something?" Naruto asked, since he hadn't pulled any pranks since leaving the academy. "No, you aren't in any trouble, but what I want to talk to you about might cause some problems later. First though, I want to congratulate you on your test, Haku. After evaluating your skills and talking it over with the Jonin involved, I have decided to award you the rank of Chunin." The old man smiled at her. "Wow, Haku-chan, I knew you were good, but to get Chunin so easily," Naruto exclaimed, hugging the girl with a huge grin on his face. Haku smiled, returning the hug with a deep blush from the leader of the village, seeing their affectionate display. After a few moments the old man coughed to get their attention. "Now that you have the good news, I am sorry to say the rest isn't as pleasant." Anbu reported what happened earlier with the Hyuga heiress. "Do either of you know why she would do something like this?" "Honestly, Gigi, I have no clue. I always thought Hinata was a nice, shy, kinda strange girl, and maybe a little sickly what with her always fainting, but I have no idea why she would do something like this," Naruto said, scratching his head. "I am sorry, Hokage-sama, but I too do not know why she would break in and attack me. I have not even met her before today. Naruto-kun has introduced me to some of his friends, and I have heard her name mentioned before, but as far as I know I have not done anything to cause her to attack me. I do have to wonder though why she told me to stay away from her, Naruto-kun, and called me a," Haku said in her usual respectful way. Sarutobi looked at the two, watching how Naruto took her hand, and smiled reassuringly. Deciding they were telling the truth, he sighed. "With that being the case, I'll send someone over to fix your door for you." Naruto smiled with his hand still holding Haku's. "Thanks, Gigi. I did what I could, but I ain't a carpenter. Sarutobi smiled at Naruto before taking a deep breath to address the next subject. I need you two to be completely honest with me on what I am about to ask, no matter how embarrassing it may be. He paused long enough to get their affirmative replies before continuing. I have heard some rumors about the relationship between you that have made me a little concerned. Just how intimate have you been with each other? Haku blushed a deep crimson, and ducked her head while looking at Naruto out of the corner of her eye. Naruto blushed as well, scratching the back of his head. Gigi. That's not the kind of thing you're supposed to talk about. I know this, and respect your privacy, but I need you to answer me. Please trust me on this, he said with a gentle smile. Naruto looked at Haku questioningly, wondering how he would answer the old man since he was clueless on the subject, except for what he had learned from Haku. Haku sighed, blushing slightly as she squeezed his hand and nodded. Hokage-sama, before I answer, might I ask why you need to know such private information? She asked formally. There are several reasons actually, the least of which is that Naruto is like my own grandson to me. Because of his unique position in this village as well as the fact he is the last heir of his clan, the politics surrounding him are very delicate. If you are referring to the fact that he is the host of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and the Senju heir, I already know about it. I also have no issue with Kyuubi as I am not from this village, and can tell the difference between a kunai and a storage scroll. Her voice turning as cold and harsh as the yokai she resembled. I see. The old man sighed, looking at Naruto sharply. It seems that Naruto trusts you more than just about everyone in the village, but that is one of the reasons I need to ask this. Haku's gaze softened and she nodded, accepting what he said. I understand your concern, Hokage-sama, but this is the only time this discussion will happen. Haku said with finality. Naruto and I have not made love yet. We have talked about it and have decided to wait until we are both ready. We have also discussed our future together, and I can assure you that I will carry his children in my womb when we choose to become parents. Sarutobi saw Naruto smile when she brought his hand over her stomach, and kissed her on the cheek, brimming with happiness at her words. He sighed, knowing Naruto wanted a family more than anything, and truly hoped Haku would not betray him, no matter how reassuring she had been. I really need to talk to Zabuza and Hiyashi about his engagement to Hinata, and secret marriage to Haku. We can't let this go any further than it already has. He thought to himself, exhaling deeply. I see. Then I guess there is only one last thing to discuss. Have you had the talk yet? Haku and Naruto shared a what the fuck look before turning back to the Hokage with confusion. Why do you want to know that, Gigi? Sarutobi glanced at Haku while coughing into his hand. Well, you see, there have been rumors about the two of you, and how fast your relationship is progressing. Haku looked at the old man with a delicately arched eyebrow raised. What exactly are these rumors, Hokage-sama, and why does our personal relationship warrant your attention? She asked in a tone that could match her bloodline with its coldness. How much does she know, Naruto? He asked with a sigh. Everything. The teen replied with a dead serious expression, and emphasizing the word to leave no room for doubt. Okay, that makes this easier. It is because of his special status, and the fact it is an S-rank village secret. It basically means that no one under 20 or not of Jonin rank knows about it. This includes all of his friends, since you are the first he has told. Then there is also the fact that he is like a grandson to me. He paused, making sure Haku understood, and continued after getting a nod in response. The rumors, well, they say that you two are more than just friends. As a matter of fact, the most recent one is about just how intimate you are. While Haku merely crossed her legs, leaning back into the couch, Naruto was a different story. His expression was at first confused, but as comprehension sparked, it quickly turned to anger. Gigi, just what do these rumors say? He asked in a voice that promised lots and lots of pain if he didn't like what he heard. It was one thing for people to trash talk about him, but it was a different story where his precious people were concerned. Calm down, Naruto. The rumors are not that bad, and these specific ones seem to have started from the Rookie 9. They just say that you two are a couple, and that you have consummated the relationship. He looked away with a slight blush, not wanting to think about the boy that had become the grandson of his heart if not blood. With a cough he turned back to the couple on the couch. Now that that is cleared up, there are some things you need to be aware of. Over the next hour Sarutobi slowly and hesitantly tried to explain the birds and the bees to the teens. The process was nearly laughable considering the number of times he paused as he had to recover from his embarrassment or perverted thoughts of a dark-haired pale-skinned beauty began clouding his mind. This however was brought to a stop by Haku when she stood up to gain his attention. I appreciate you doing this for Naruto-kun, Hokage-sama, but I am sure you have better things to do with your time. Another thing is that it seems you have not read the report about my medical knowledge, and the fact I am more than prepared to explain or prevent anything unwanted that might occur. She said, ushering him out the door. When he was finally outside the apartment she smiled, licking her lips sensually, speaking in a husky tone that sent a shiver down his aged spine. Naruto is such a good hands-on learner. She all but purred before slamming the door in his face and locking it. While Sarutobi walked away giggling perversely, sporting a slight nosebleed, Haku shook her head and sat down on the couch next to Naruto. With a sigh of contentment she rested her head on his shoulder, enjoying the feel of his body heat as she cuddled up to his side. For a closet pervert, Gigi sure had a lot of trouble talking about that. If he had gone on much longer I would have started laughing in his face. Naruto said as he slipped his arm around Haku's waist. Haku closed her eyes and scooted closer to Naruto until their hips were touching. I know. It's really sad that the Hokage of all people would have trouble talking about something as simple and commonplace as. I do feel a little insulted though that he doesn't have faith in you or my medical knowledge. I mean seriously, it's like he thinks I'd forget to take precautions if we were at that stage of our relationship. Naruto chuckled softly at how cute Haku was with her lips pursed in a pout. Yeah, you'd think he'd know me better than that by now. Lowering his head until Haku could feel his breath on her ear he whispered huskily. No matter how much I want to worship the body of my Yuki Tenshi. Haku blushed slightly, and her breathing hitched as his words sparked her arousal. Narukoi, you promised. He smiled softly, rubbing her hip. Yes, and I always keep my promises. Nothing more intimate than kisses and cuddles until you and Zabuza are official members of Konoha. Looking at him with half-lidded eyes through her eyelashes and enjoying the aroused yet sleepy state she was in, spoke softly as if she was unconsciously voicing her thoughts. If my apartment wasn't so close I'd let Otu-san have it when I move in. Naruto looked at her in surprise, his eyes softening when he saw how sleepy she was despite the heat he saw in her eyes. Let's go to bed, Haim. He said softly, picking her up. After he laid her on the bed he removed his shirt and slid in next to her. Slipping an arm around her as she cuddled up to him with a muffled, warm, he watched her breathing even out, adoring how the moonlight only made her look more like an angel. For once there is a promise I don't want to keep. He breathed, thinking about how hard it was not to join their bodies similarly to how their hearts have before he too fell into unconsciousness. With the vacation Sarutobi had given them over, Haku went to the Hokage's office to report for duty assignment, and Team 7 was once again meeting at their training ground. Naruto yawned from his position on the branch of a tree as he settled in for a nap while waiting for Kakashi to show up. Sasuke was sitting under a tree about 10 yards away brooding, while Sakura in her typical fangirl way tried to get him to go on a date with her. This went on for nearly 2 hours before Kakashi finally showed up. Yo, the one-eyed Jonin said as he appeared near them. Genin. You're late, Sakura screeched while glaring at him. Sorry, there was a little girl that had lost her cat, and was crying as she desperately tried to find it. Being the gentleman I am, I can't resist the tear-filled eyes of a girl, and had to help her find it. Kakashi I smiled. Liar, was the piercing shriek that was heard, causing Naruto to jerk awake and fall out of the tree. Gah, what the hell, Sakura? Did you make a nails on chalkboard jutsu? Naruto growled as he dusted himself off, giving the pinkett a dirty look. Well, that's a switch, Kakashi thought to himself, surprised at how the blonde was reacting to Sakura, and by the looks on her and Sasuke's faces he wasn't the only one. Enough guys, I have an announcement to make. I have decided to nominate you for the upcoming Chunin exams. Whether or not you participate is up to you. Pulling out the consent forms he handed one to each of them before continuing. If you want to try to become Chunin you will have to fill these out and report to room 301 at the academy by 3 p.m. tomorrow. Yane. With his task done he vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto already knew he was going to participate in the exam, so he pocketed the form, and walked over to Sakura. Hey, Sakura, can I talk with you for a moment? The pink-haired girl who had been biting her lip while staring at the form jerked her head up, and scowled at the blonde. What do you want, Naruto Baka? Just barely he managed to repress the sigh and eye-rolling he so wanted to do, glad that he could finally stop pretending to be infatuated with the Banshee. I want to know if you could do me a favor. Haku-chan has some shopping to do, and I was wondering if maybe you and Ino could help her. Crossing her arms, Sakura raised an eyebrow. Can't you take her yourself? Blushing slightly he scratched the back of his head. Normally yeah, but I can't this time. I have to talk with Gigi, and well, she needs female things. It was a couple moments before she realized what he was referring to, but when she did her eyes widened. Oh, sure, I can help her. After all, I'm sure she is itching to get away from you considering how useless and annoying you are. Naruto let the insult slide by imagining the expression on her face if she found them asleep together. Thanks, Sakura, I'm sure she'll be happy to have some girl time. Just tell the cashier that everything Haku buys is on the Hokage's bill. He said with his usual foxy smile. Hearing this elicited a reaction that anyone who has any experience with either fangirls or women shopping with someone else's money would recognize. A high-pitched squeal of almost hypersonic proportions resounded through the clearing, causing Naruto to clamp his hands over his ears, and Sasuke to run for his life. Oh, I will definitely get Ino Pig to help. We can't let Haku go without essentials that every woman needs. Don't expect her back until late afternoon, early evening. Thanks, Sakura, I knew I could count on you. Naruto beamed before running off with a wave on his way to the Hokage Tower. While Sakura gathered up Ino and Haku for the impromptu shopping spree courtesy of the Hokage, albeit unbeknownst to him, Naruto went to speak with the old man. Ignoring the dirty look from the secretary, Naruto walked right into the Hokage's office without knocking. Hey, Gigi, you got a few minutes? There is something important I need to talk to you about, he said, closing the door behind him. I always have time for you, Naruto, Sarutobi said with a smile. What is it you want to talk about? Taking a seat in one of the chairs, the teen put a serious expression on his face as his eyes darted to the most likely places that the Hokage's personal Anbu guards could be hiding. Could you use that silencing jutsu you have? I don't want this known to anyone besides you and me. Not missing the look on Naruto's face, Sarutobi signals for the Anbu to leave, and seals the room with a security jutsu. What is so important to make you so serious, Naruto? The Hokage asked, taking a drag from his pipe. Well, first off, I'd like to borrow one of the generators for Raiden training. Sarutobi arched an eyebrow at this, knowing he was hiding something more given the boy's body language. Just what kind of training, Naruto? The blonde sighed, knowing he'd have to come clean with all of his training at this point. I had better start at the beginning. You remember how my eyes got damaged on the mission that ended with Haku coming here? He asked, hoping that this would go easier than he was thinking it would. Sarutobi, wondering where this was going, simply nodded his head as he slowly puffed on his pipe. I remember. The report said that you should have been permanently blinded during the fight on the bridge. Yeah, I would have if the furball hadn't healed me, but that is why I need the generator. Basically what happened is that there was a surge of chakra while the fox was healing me, and it resulted in my eyes being altered, as well as a few other things. Seeing Sarutobi about to say something, Naruto activated the ocular bloodline showing the Jagan. Thanks to the fox's mistake, I now have a bloodline called Jagan. When my eyes changed, it seems that some of the furball's knowledge was also passed to me, and I have been training in some of the things I learned from the memories. The training is pretty much just chakra control, strength, endurance, and elemental affinity training. That's why I need to use the generator so I can work on my Raiden affinity, and fine-tune my control more. The teen said, hoping that Sarutobi wouldn't call him on the half-truths he just spouted. I see, the Hokage said, deep in thought about what he just heard. He could tell that Naruto was nervous, and understandably so, especially if the council heard how he gained the bloodline. Tell me about your eyes. What can they do? Well, there are a few things it can do. I can summon a black flame, but I have to train so I don't suffer any damage from using it. I can also form an intense flame around my arms that is hot enough to melt rock. On top of that, I have also gained the ability to sense chakra in a wide area depending on how much I concentrate on it. Sounds like a cross between the Mangekyo Sharingan and the Byakugan. I wonder if this has anything to do with the rumors about bloodlines starting from demons. The old man thought to himself. So I take it you've had this since before you left Wave? He asked, getting a nod in return. I would tell you to go to the hospital for an examination, but with the Chunin exams starting tomorrow it will have to wait, as will your request to use the generators. I'll make my decision about that after you get done with the medical tests. While not pleased with having to wait, he understood why. Okay, Gigi, just let me know when to show up at the hospital, and I'll be there. I'll do that while you are taking the exams. I'll get it arranged during that time. Naruto stood up and started to walk out, but stopped in the doorway. Before I forget, I told Sakura to take Haku on a shopping spree for some things she needs with Ino's help. I also told her to have everything billed to you since I knew you wouldn't mind. He said with a foxy grin before running out of the tower. Sarutobi chuckled at this until he realized that he would have to pay for 3 teenage girls, 2 of which were fangirls, going shopping for Kami knows what. Just the thought of how much the clothes alone were going to cost him nearly gave him a heart attack. Anbu, bring Naruto to me at once. Call in the ones that are off duty to help if needed. He yelled, wondering what else Naruto would do, and how much more paperwork it would cause. 2 hours later, Naruto is hiding in an alley under an awning, having gotten bored outrunning Anbu. The blonde was preparing to leave his hiding spot when Konohamaru sprinted into the alley with a kunai in hand, and slid behind some garbage cans. Mere moments after the young boy concealed himself, Iruka came running through, and kept going, having not seen the academy student. After a few moments, Konohamaru slipped from his hiding spot watching for Iruka, and never noticed Naruto sneak up behind him until he slapped his hand onto the boy's shoulder, causing him to jump. Aren't you supposed to be in class, Konohamaru? Naruto asked with a smile. Geez, boss, give me heart attack, why don't you? The boy would have said more. But Naruto suddenly yanked the boy into a recessed doorway with one hand over his mouth right before a couple Anbu went by on the rooftops. When they were gone, Naruto released him with a chuckle. What did you do now, boss? The boy asked, wondering what prank had been pulled this time. I had Sakura and Ino take Haku-chan out shopping, and told them to send the bill to Gigi. He said with a very fox-like grin. Konohamaru laughed, having seen just how much that would cost after having been dragged along by his uncle Asuma when Kurenai got him to take her and Hinata shopping a few months ago. That's cruel, boss. I don't know who I pity more, Haku or Grandpa. Naruto scratched the back of his head a bit sheepishly. I know, but I had to go see Gigi privately, and I didn't want to upset Haku-chan. He said as they started to walk out of the alley. Their conversation moved to their training and what pranks they had done recently as they walked until they heard a shout. Naru Koi. Turning in the direction they heard the shout from, they saw Haku, Ino, and Sakura all wearing new outfits, and with their hair done. Ino was wearing an indigo skirt that had a slit going halfway up the left side, a strapless red shirt that seemed a size or two too small from the way it hugged her curves, and knee-high leather boots that were laced up the sides. Sakura was wearing a fuchsia ankle-length short-sleeve dress, white Grecian-style sandals that went to just above her ankles, and her hair pulled back with a pink ribbon. Haku was wearing a pale blue sundress that stopped just above her knees, her hair hanging loose down her back to just above her hips, and on her feet were open-toed sandals of soft pastel blue color. Naruto stood stock still, admiring how the sunlight seemed to create a halo around Haku, making her look like an angel of ethereal beauty. His face must have spoken for him if the blush Haku had was any indication. While Ino and Sakura exchanged smirks and mentally patted themselves on the back, Naruto finally began to move. He slowly walked up to Haku and kissed her hand. "Did it hurt?" he asked softly, looking into her eyes. "What?" Haku said, confused about what he meant. "Did it hurt when you fell from heaven, Tenshi?" he said softly, caressing her hand with his thumb. Haku blushed at the compliment while Ino and Sakura grumbled that no one complimented them like that, and Konohamaru chuckled, thinking that Naruto was definitely a ladies' man. "Hey, Naruto, do I look good too?" Sakura asked, acting a bit demure, somewhat missing the attention the blonde used to pay to her. Before Naruto could answer, Konohamaru spoke up. "Compared to her, you look like a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. I wish I could find a girl like her someday." This of course had the unintended reaction of seriously pissing off the pink-haired girl that now had a huge tick mark on her forehead. "Who does that little shit think he is? We look so great that Sasuke-kun will ask us for a date." Inner Sakura said in a huff. "Yeah, he'll be sure to make me his girlfriend when he sees us in this outfit." Sakura said, picturing said Uchiha on his knees with a bouquet of flowers. "Hey, boss, can you teach me how to get someone as pretty as Haku Nichan, and not one that looks like a walking medicine bottle?" the oblivious kid asked of his idol. "Oh hell no, he didn't call us a medicine bottle. Let's kick his." Inner Sakura shouted. Sakura mentally nodded in agreement as she stomped toward the youngest of the Sarutobi clan. Konohamaru didn't realize the danger he was in until he was knocked on his by the pinkett. "Watch your mouth, Gaki. You shouldn't talk to pretty women like that," she growled out, crossing her arms. Konohamaru rubbed his head, glaring up at Sakura. "There are no pretty women here. Haku Nichan is a beautiful woman, Ino is a pretty girl, and you are the bastard child of a banshee and an ogre." Sadly, Sakura's reaction only proved Konohamaru right when she screeched and ran after the boy, intent on beating him to a bloody pulp. Naruto sighed, watching the scene. "We'd better go after them before Sakura hurts him too much," he said before giving chase with Haku right behind him. After a couple blocks, Konohamaru ran into someone that looked like a third-rate cross-dresser from the cheap section of the red light district, who picked him up by the shirt. "Watch where you're going, brat," the growled out menacingly. "Put me down. I am the grandson of the Hokage," Konohamaru said as he struggled to get free. "Kankuro, you should put him down. We don't want to cause trouble," a blonde girl in a black battle kimono with a large fan on her back said, seeing Naruto, Haku, Ino, and Sakura arrive. "I'm just going to teach this little shit a lesson is all," the now-named boy said as he drew back his fist. Before the punch could land, Kankuro suddenly found a kunai to his throat courtesy of Naruto, while the blonde girl found herself in a similar situation thanks to Haku pressing a senbon against her jugular. "You have terrible manners to be acting this way in someone else's village," Naruto said in a deathly whisper, causing Kankuro to sweat. Before anything else could be said or done, a harsh voice spoke up from a nearby tree. "You are a disgrace to Suna, Kankuro." "Gee, Gaara, it's not my fault," the makeup-coated boy tried to explain. "Shut up or I'll kill you," the redhead said as he appeared on the ground via a sand shunshin. Naruto backed away from Kankuro, eyeing the new arrival cautiously after getting a warning from Kyuubi about the boy. Haku moved to a position near Naruto with her senbon ready, since her experienced senses told her the redhead was dangerous. Gaara looked over the Konoha nin until his eyes landed on Naruto. "What is your name?" the redhead asked in an emotionless voice. "Uzumaki Naruto," he replied, his eyes never leaving Gaara's. "Subaku no Gaara," Gaara said as he began to walk away. "Kankuro, Temari, let's go." Sakura, who had remained silent so far, chose this time to speak up. "What are foreign ninja doing here?" the girl, now identified as Temari, looked over her shoulder with a sneer. "We're here for the Chunin exams. You must really be as stupid as you are ugly if you don't know it starts tomorrow. Ino, Sakura, if you come across him in the exams, run. That Gaara is very dangerous." Naruto said as he helped Konohamaru up. There is nothing to worry about. Sasuke-kun will protect me if anything happens. The Pinkett said, actually believing it. You should listen him, Sakura-san. Those three are very dangerous. Especially the red-headed boy. It would be a grave mistake to underestimate them. The pale beauty stated quite seriously. Sakura merely grunted while Ino looked worried, and was having second thoughts about entering the exam. The group parted ways with Konohamaru heading back to the academy, Sakura and Ino heading to a cafe, and Haku heads back home with Naruto promising to make them lunch. The next morning Naruto woke up to the smell of bacon, toast, and eggs. Getting out of bed he stretched, and caught the sound of someone singing softly. Walking out of the bedroom he saw Haku making breakfast as she sung to herself. The sight made it impossible not to smile, and he leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed enjoying the show. A few minutes later when Haku was plating the meal he walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Good morning, Yuki Tenshi. Haku leaned back into him with a smile as she placed her arms over his. Good morning, Naruto. Did you sleep well? How could I not with a beautiful angel lying next to me? He said, nuzzling her neck. Breakfast will get cold if you keep that up, she said softly, knowing that today was going to be busy for both of them. Hi, he said, kissing the spot where her neck met her shoulder before picking up the plates and setting them on the table. Haku grabbed the chopsticks before sitting down with him to eat. After the meal was done and the dishes were taken care of, they sat down on the couch, each with a cup of tea. What are you going to be doing while I'm busy with the exams? Naruto asked, slightly worried about being away from her. Hokage-sama has assigned me to help the medics for the exams when needed since my internship at the hospital has gone so well, she said between sips of tea. I'm glad that you're doing so well there. They haven't been giving you a hard time, have they? He asked, hoping that the civilian staff wasn't harassing her because of him. There have been a few idiots, but they keep themselves to snide remarks. I did have to teach one of the orderlies a lesson when he kept pestering me for a date, and wouldn't take no for an answer. Naruto growled hearing this. Who was it? I'll rip his balls off. Haku smiled and placed a delicate hand over his. Don't worry about it, Naruto. I encased him in ice from the waist down, and when the head nurse found out what happened he was assigned to empty the bedpans in the geriatric ward for the next month. Naruto snickered at the thought of the orderly having to deal with cranky old people with bowel issues. Okay, I guess that's a fitting punishment, but if he tries anything again I'll prank him so hard his hair will fall out. Haku leaned forward to kiss him on the cheek. I am so lucky to have you as my champion, she said with a smile, letting her breath caress his ear. The blonde's face reddened slightly as a nice shiver went down his spine. Ha, Haku-chan, you know what that does to me. He whined as he fought his hormones, which was exceedingly hard considering the view he had from Haku leaning forward. The Ice Maiden giggled as she picked up her tea. Do I? She said coyly as she sipped her tea with a slight smile, taking pleasure from how she could fluster the energetic teen so easily. Getting up she put the cup in the sink with a sway to her hips. On her way to the door she ran her fingers along his jaw, increasing the sway in her hips. I may have a present for you if you make it to the finals, Goshujin-sama. Naruto sputtered upon hearing not just what she said but how she said it, and could only stare as she left the apartment giggling. Nearly 15 minutes went by before he could pull himself together, and decided that a cold shower was in order. A very, very cold shower. After spending a solid 30 minutes in ice-cold water he got dressed and armed himself for the exams. Checking the time he decided to take a leisurely walk to the academy to get his head in the game. As he walked he saw there were a lot more people out and about, including those from the other ninja villages participating in the exams. There was still had a little over half an hour before the deadline when Naruto finally arrived at the academy. Seeing Sakura and Sasuke he walked over waving. Hey guys, he said loudly when he got near them. What took you so long, Naruto Baka? We've been here for over an hour now. The pink-haired banshee yelled, shaking her fist. About time you showed up, Dobi. Hurry up before we get disqualified, Sasuke said in his usual arrogant tone as he headed into the building. When they reached the second floor they saw a crowd gathered by around some people trying to get into a door. Fools, Sasuke said, seeing through the genjutsu thanks to his bloodline. Leave them to be disqualified, we don't have much time, Sasuke said with a sneer, and headed up the stairs with the rest of Team 7 following. As they got to the right room they saw Kakashi leaning against the wall. Hi, Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? Sakura asked, oblivious to the hidden meaning behind the exams with her obsession about Sasuke. I am here to congratulate you on showing up as a team. If you had not, you wouldn't be allowed to take the exams. What? Sasuke growled out, not liking the fact that his passing was dependent on his teammates. In order for any of you to take the exams, you all would have to show up. If even one of you had decided not to enter, then none of you would be allowed to take the test, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Why didn't you tell us before, sensei? Naruto asked, wondering if they even had a chance of making Chunin, since Sasuke thought that others only got in his way, and Sakura would only follow Sasuke like a lost puppy. You could consider it the first part of the exams. Being a Chunin is about more than just fighting ability. As a Chunin you must also work as part of a team, and have to rely on them just as they will rely on you, the Cyclops said as he pushed off the wall. Good luck, team, and come back, Chunin. Walking through the doors, Team 7 observed nearly 200 genin from several villages trying to become Chunin. The room was awash with bloodlust, anger, arrogance, fear, and several other emotions. While Sakura had begun to get very worried, and Sasuke smirked arrogantly, Naruto was carefully taking note of the teams that Jagan and Kyuubi were telling him might dangerous. Troublesome. You guys are taking the exams too, said a lazy voice belonging to one Nara Shikamaru. Sasuke-kun, was yelled by Yamanaka Ino right before she took one of his arms possessively. Get off him, Ino pig, Sakura said before she started yet another argument with the blonde girl. As the two fangirls fought over, the Uchiha Team 8 walked up to the group, having heard them from across the room. What are you doing here? With the Dobi on your team you are gonna fail and no bloodline is going to help. He laughed, not knowing about Naruto's new eyes. Not only did Kiba manage to piss off Sasuke, he unwittingly pissed off the Jagan. Before either Sasuke or Naruto could respond to the insult, there was a large puff of smoke at the front of the room as a large group of Chunin and Jonin appeared. Alright, maggots, shut up and form a line. The first stage of the exams are about to begin. Each slip of paper has the number for your seat. Morino Ibiki, the Jonin head of Konoha's INT, growled out. Over the next several minutes the Chunin hopefuls went to their assigned seats as Ibiki wrote out the rules for the test, and Naruto soon realized the test was a written exam. Fear not. Now that you house me you can read others' surface thoughts. I was not going to let you use this power yet, as I have yet to find you worthy of it, but that dogboy has raised my ire, the Jagan said with a tone that said he was still angered by Kiba. Wait, you mean I can do mind tricks like the Yamanaka can now? Naruto asked silently as the prank possibilities ran through his mind. What I can do is more than mere tricks, boy. Now act like you are trying to work out the questions while focusing on someone in the room for the answers. Naruto did just that and found some of what he heard ranged from the pathetic and comical to downright disturbing. Finally he locked onto someone with the answers, and filled out the test at a slow rate so as not to draw attention to himself. 45 minutes later Ibiki got everyone's attention, announcing that it was time for the last question. Naruto was tempted to yell out, but refrained himself after being told that the more that dropped out the better his chances to make Chunin. Soon the number of teams had dwindled to less than 30, and Ibiki congratulated everyone on passing. As he was explaining the purpose of the test and their responsibilities as Chunin, the window suddenly shattered, and a woman wearing a trench coat, skirt, and fishnet, leaving very little to the imagination, announced herself as the proctor for the second stage of the exams. Listen up, meat bags. My name is Mitarashi Anko, and proctor for the second stage of the exams. Those of you left meet me at training ground 44 in 2 hours. Anyone that is late will be disqualified along with the rest of their team. With that said, Anko, Ibiki, and the Chunin disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto waited for the crowd to thin before walking out. Since the training ground was only 10 minutes outside Konoha proper, he decided to get something to eat before heading over there. After spending an hour at Ichiraku's, he paid his bill, and headed to the Forest of Death, arriving 20 minutes early. Seeing only a few Chunin he didn't know, he decided to talk with Jagan and Kyuubi about future training sessions after the exams were over. He was brought back to reality when Anko started her lecture on how the second stage was geared toward survival, and that it would be team versus team. Naruto had activated the Jagan, listening to her with only half an ear as he scanned for Haku. When she got to the part about how the nickname for the training ground was the Forest of Death, it was coincidentally the same time he has caught Haku thinking about studying up on silencing jutsu so Zabuza wouldn't hear her giving Naruto his present after he made it to the finals, causing him to laugh. Anko may not have been the bloodlusting, crazed psychopath that her reputation made her out to be, but it was one she carefully molded, and was proud of, so a mere genin laughing pissed her off. Deciding to make an example of him for the others, she threw a kunai, and used Shunshin to get behind him, having no idea about the training he had gone through since Wave. Naruto dodged the kunai, and sensing the chakra spike, spun around only to end up with one hand under her coat, the other up her skirt, and in a lip lock with the Tokubetsu Jonin. While they were both surprised by this, Naruto recovered first, feeling the temperature drop. Using Anko's shock against her, he quickly swiped the scrolls from her coat before stepping back with a smirk. Not bad, but I have to admit that Haku Tenshi kisses a lot better. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, his smirk widens before taking one last shot at the Jonin. Plus her is a lot firmer. Seeing Anko's expression turn downright evil as she grabbed a kunai, he used a kawarimi to switch with a chair near Haku, barely evading getting stabbed. Moving quickly, he pulled Haku tightly to him, and kissed her deeply, earning a muffled moan from her. Even though she thoroughly enjoyed the kiss, it didn't alleviate all of her anger. Breaking the kiss for some much-needed air, the pair ignored the catcalls from the genin. Tightening the hug, Naruto nuzzled her neck as he whispered softly, "Please don't be angry, my Yuki Tenshi. You are the only woman I dream of." Haku breathed deeply, taking in the feel of him in her arms as well as his scent before pulling back. "I know, Koishi, but we will talk about this later. Right now I think you should get back to your team before Anko-senpai gets back up here." Naruto glanced over to where Haku was looking, and paled when he saw Anko stomping towards them. Swallowing heavily, he quickly kissed Haku once again, and told her he loved her before exchanging places with the chair he used earlier. He scratched the back of his head with a lopsided grin as Anko growled, having missed her prey once again. A senior Chunin placed a hand on Anko's shoulder, and whispered in her ear, calming her down slightly. Casting one last glare at Naruto, she addressed the genin once more. "Since the Ice Princess's boy toy has thawed her out some, maybe now we can continue," Anko said, looking pointedly at Naruto, causing Haku to blush. After a moment, Anko went on to tell them about the chances of dying, and handed out the release waivers. In short order, Team 7 had turned them in to get their scroll, and moved to their assigned gate. Naruto waited impatiently for the gate to open so he could get this stage over. The reason for his impatience was very simple. He would be away from Haku for nearly a week, and was dreading it. 15 minutes that felt like an eternity for Naruto. Later the gate finally opened, and Team 7 started 5 days that would change their lives more than they ever could have imagined. While the newest generations of ninjas were fighting, a meeting between those who had earned their rank time and again through the years was taking place. At the head of the table was a political and economic powerhouse by the name of Hyuga Hiyashi. Due to the importance and formality of the occasion, there were several servants kneeling along the walls, a geisha to properly serve tea, and aides to ensure that what was discussed was instantly put on paper. As he watched his guests, Hiyashi was glad he had ordered the geisha to perform a chakai instead of a chaji. He could tell that Momochi Zabuza was an impatient man, and from the way his eyes jerked around, his tolerance for proper etiquette was quickly shrinking. The other guests seemed completely at ease in comparison. The aged man sat calmly puffing on his pipe, belying the aura of authority and power that saturated the air around him. Even with as busy as the most powerful man in the village Sarutobi Hiruzen, he had made time for this meeting. When their eyes met, Hiyashi got the implied message in the older man's eyes. Hurry up, I have work to do, and he looks ready to chew through the floor. The clan head held back a sigh at the lack of adherence to proper protocol, and gestured for the geisha to finish serving tea. With that done, he looked over to the aide whose job it was to inscribe what was said to prevent any problems later. Seeing he was ready, he gestured so that the rest of the aides knew the meeting was about to start. Is there anything either of you wish to discuss before we begin this meeting? While Zabuza merely grunted, Hiruzen set his pipe down, and took a sip of tea before answering. How has Hinata been, and have you told her about the purpose of this meeting? The old man asked. My daughter's behavior that night is inexcusable for one of her station. When not with her team, she has been barred from training, and has been assigned to help out the branch house with menial tasks. She seems to truly regret her actions, and is in fear of Uzumaki-san's reaction from what her handlers have reported. I have ordered that she is not to know about this meeting or anything pertaining to it until after we have reached an accord. Hiyashi said in a tightly controlled tone, despite the fact he was still quite upset with Hinata over the shame she brought to the clan by attacking Haku. Hiruzen took a long sip of tea as he eyed Hiyashi before gently setting the cup down for the geisha to refill. I see. Do you have anything, Zabuza? Getting a negative shake of the head in reply, he took another sip of tea before speaking. Then let this meeting officially begin. We are here to discuss the possibility of Hyuga Hinata joining with Uzumaki Naruto. Is everyone in agreement with that? Hi, Hokage-sama. Hiyashi spoke respectfully. Yeah, Zabuza said, unhappy about this, seeing as it might cause problems for Haku. Hiyashi held out a hand to one of the aides, and was given a scroll with a marriage contract for Hinata and Naruto. Laying the scroll down on the table, he slid it in Hiruzen's direction. As you can see, it is a standard marriage contract concerning a clan heiress. As long as you understand that Haku will be the matriarch since they are already together, and Hinata will be intruding on their relationship, there shouldn't be any problems. Zabuza said with a casual dismissal of the contract Sarutobi was going over. Oh, why should some orphan you adopted have that honor when Hinata has been trained for years in the duties of heiress? Hiyashi said arrogantly. Your daughter might have the knowledge, but she sure as hell doesn't have the will. That girl has no strength of spirit, and would be overwhelmed in any situation where Naruto wasn't by her side. Haku, on the other hand, has proven herself strong enough to stand by Naruto's side, and not behind him. For the next few minutes, Zabuza and Hiyashi traded insults disguised as negotiations while Sarutobi read over the document the Hyuga had prepared. When he was done, he rolled the scroll back up and slapped it against his palm loudly. Hyuga-san, I have to say that this document is preposterous. Hyuga superiority, tithes, council vote binding, and mandatory use of the caged bird seal on any children that show the Byakugan. This reads like it was drawn up by Fugaku. I am disappointed in you, Hiyashi. Hiruzen said harshly before using a minor Kaiden jutsu to incinerate the scroll. Hearing this, Zabuza's arm started to move as if to grab Kubikiribocho, which, fortunately for the Hyuga, was left behind. Hiyashi's reaction was almost normal as his stoic Hyuga facade cracked. His head whipped around to look at the one he had draw up the contract, glaring at him for an explanation. What is the meaning of this? Hiyashi said in a voice as cold as winter in Yuki no Kuni. The aide started to sweat under the gaze of his clan head, but truly became fearful when Zabuza leveled the full brunt of his ki on him. He was left to hyperventilate, and shake like a leaf in a storm until Sarutobi placed his hand on Zabuza's shoulder. With a slight growl, Zabuza reined in his anger while the old man turned his eyes to the aide. According to Hiyashi-san's words, this was supposed to be a standard marriage contract. If that was the case, why present something that is most definitely not standard, and breaks some of the oldest inter-clan laws of Konoha? The aide was in a very unique position, considering that at the moment he was the target of not only Hiyashi's anger, but Momochi Zabuza, demon of the mist, the man infamous for slaughtering his entire academy class before he even graduated, and Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage, the professor, and Kami no Shinobi. When faced with that, he did what any smart man would do, he folded like origami. With there not being a female heir since the clan wars, I had consulted with Hiyashi-sama's father to make sure everything was in order. After meeting with him, he said that he would handle drawing up the contract, since it would be best to look through the records vault of the main family before finalizing the contract. It was just this morning that the finished contract was delivered to me. The aide said, with kneeling with his head on the floor, feeling the stares of 3 men that could wipe him from existence before he could blink, focused on him. After few moments, Hiyashi managed to take his gaze from the aide, and looked at his guests. Zabuza was understandably pissed, and glaring at the aide. Sarutobi, however, was looking at Hiyashi with a raised eyebrow, and a curious expression on his face. Sighing deeply, the clan head knew that there was really only one thing he could do if he wished to salvage the situation in any form, and pushed himself back from the table. He then placed his hands on the floor and lowered his head onto his hands in a position of complete submission. As clan head, I humbly ask you forgiveness for this gross error. You have my sincerest apologies for this, and I assure you that it will be rectified. If you will allow it, I will personally draw up the correct documentation so that we can continue this at a later date. Hiyashi said from his prone position. With his role being mostly that of mediator during this meeting, Sarutobi filled his pipe, and started smoking it as possible scenarios ran through his mind. While the Hokage was doing that, Zabuza stared long and hard at Hiyashi, debating what to do. He knew that the Hyuga were a powerful clan, and could cause trouble for not only himself, but Haku and Naruto as well if he refused. On the other hand, if he agreed to a rescheduled meeting, it could be very beneficial to them. Eventually Zabuza nodded his head, having come to a decision. I'll agree to another meeting on 2 conditions. Zabuza said, causing Hiyashi to move back to his previous spot at the table while the aide hadn't moved, as he was still praying that he would come out of this alive and intact. The first condition is that Naruto and Haku will be at the next meeting, since this concerns them both. The second one, Zabuza grinned in a feral way, showing off his shark-like teeth. If a mistake like this happens again, I get to take care of it personally. Having no doubt about what the ex-missing nin meant, Hiyashi truly hoped nothing like that would happen, as he imagined the cleanup bill would be outrageous. I see no problem with that. And I give you my word of honor as clan head that if any further mistakes are made, I will personally deliver the ones responsible to you. Blowing out a long stream of smoke, Sarutobi finally spoke up. Considering we are in agreement on this, I suggest we call this meeting to a close, and reschedule the next one for when the second stage of the exams are over. With both Hiyashi and Zabuza agreeing with the Hokage's request, they bid their farewells. When the geisha slid the door shut as she escorted them out of the compound, Hiyashi leveled his gaze upon the aide with his Byakugan fully activated. You will tell me in full detail exactly how this happened. I will decide upon your fate once I am satisfied. The clan head said in a tone that would have frozen the balls off of a penguin. Just outside the fence surrounding the Forest of Death, several chunin were packing up the extra scrolls, and other things that had been set up for this stage of the exams. Anko surveyed their work, seeing that things were going well. Looking around, she saw Haku staring off into the forest, and shook her head at the girl before a thought occurred to her. Carefully she sneaked up behind her and groped her. Haku jerked in surprise, and spun around ready to maim whoever was responsible, only to have her eyes widen at who it was. Anyo, Anko-san, what are you doing? Anko had a thoughtful look on her face as she flexed her hand a few times before answering. Damn, that Gaki was right. Yours firmer than mine. The Tokubetsu Jonin grumbled. Haku blinked, and wondered where that had come from, since she hadn't heard Naruto's comment. What are you talking about? Anko popped her neck before exhaling deeply. When I used Shunshin to get behind your boyfriend, he somehow managed to sense the chakra spike, and ended up with his hands up my skirt, and under my trenchcoat. He then groped my, and told me that not only was yours firmer, but you were a better kisser as well. Haku blushed hearing this, but couldn't help but smile at the ego boost it was knowing Naruto found her body better than the woman in front of her. Oh, he is definitely getting a present when he gets home. Oi, wipe that smirk off your face, girly. Just because you have a nice body doesn't mean you know how to use it. Anko said with a smirk as she